The rewards up for grabs during this mission were spectacular. That alone showed how much the leadership of Seven Blood Eyes detested Night Dove. It wasn't just Su Qing who was deeply struck. It was all of Unit 6. Everyone stood there with shining eyes, chuckling and licking their lips. Some even had expressions of open desire. To disciples in Seven Blood Eyes, cultivation resources were everything. Just about everyone in Unit 6 would spend time hunting bounties to make extra cash. Large-scale operations didn't come along very often, and thus, everyone realized that if things went well, the immediate future would be filled with days of plenty. "Captain, when do we start?" "Yeah, let's do this." Upon hearing the anxious exclamations of the unit, the captain laughed. Taking a bite of apple, he produced a handful of Jade slips which he passed out. "Our goal isn't very big. The two hideout chiefs in the great circle of chi condensation. We have to take out those two. Once we reach the hideout, I'll sneak in to kill the first. The rest of you find the other and surround him. If you can kill him, fine. If you can't, then at least buy enough time for me to show up. I really hope that everyone is alive at the end of this operation. Now, let's head out." The entire Violent Crimes Division was on the move. As the moon shone down onto the division headquarters, countless figures emerged, speeding off in different directions into the city. They moved quickly, emanating somber and desolate auras. The streams of people looked almost like tentacles stretching out, as though the Violent Crimes Division were some primordial beast that had just awakened and was ready to rain fury down on its enemies. Every criminal in the city was shocked. As Su Qing sped along with Unit 6, his eyes shone with anticipation. Whatever unit kills a hideout chief will get 10 spirit stones per constable. That means if Unit 6 kills 2 of them, we'll get 20 spirit stones each. He had already read through the Jade slip the captain had passed out. It contained detailed information about everyone holed up in the hideout. That included a physical description and their preferred techniques. Obviously, the division had worked hard in recent days to run a very thorough investigation into Night Dove. No one spoke. They simply followed the captain, moving faster and faster, their killing intent growing stronger. There had been absolutely no advance warning that the Violent Crimes Division was going to run an operation this night. Because of that, everyone they passed in the darkness was absolutely shaken to the core and immediately ran into hiding. The brothels and gambling halls, which were usually bustling places, went completely silent. Their doors shut, and everyone inside waited with hearts pounding. Every criminal in the city knew full well that with the Violent Crimes Division on the move like this, blood would run in the streets. Countless people would lose their lives. It would be like a lightning bolt from the sky, cleansing the city of unhealthy yin. Many of the inns in the city chose to keep their doors closed, and that included the one on Plankspring Way. As Unit 6 passed by that very street, Su Qing caught a glimpse of the old innkeeper through the window. Their eyes met for a moment. He's scared. Su Qing looked down at the badge on his gray Taoist robe. On this night at least, that robe and badge represented the grandeur of Seven Blood Eyes. Whatever snakes or dragons lurked in the city would be forced to bow their heads and shrink back in deference, and anyone who tried to interfere with this operation would be crushed out of existence. Earlier, as the captain was allocating different mission tasks, he had said, "Every place in existence has a mix of light and darkness. Our city is no exception. The sect treats us like venomous bugs in a jar. They allow the darkness to proliferate, but there are 2 lines which cannot be crossed. 1, you can't harm the ordinary citizens. 2, outside Foundation establishment cultivators can't kill chi condensation disciples. Anyone who crosses one of those lines will pay the price." Although Su Qing had known that from the beginning, the operation tonight was the first time he'd seen how domineering Seven Blood Eyes was when it came to enforcing those rules. It took an hour for them to reach their destination. The hideout was located in a sprawling manor. The moon hung in the sky over the dark lands below. The manor was lit with lamps, but in the darkness, they seemed like little more than flickering sparks. As Unit 6 approached, a few Violent Crimes Division constables emerged from hiding spots to meet them. They were the disciples assigned to surveillance. Upon seeing the captain, they clasped hands in salute, then left. "Follow the plan," the captain said. "Let's go." Eyes shining, he slipped into the manor. Next, 8 constables split off from the group to cut off all avenues of escape. The remaining dozen or so headed to predetermined spots to infiltrate the place. Su Qing was one of the infiltrators, and he moved with the speed and grace of a cat. From a distance, the various constables of Unit 6 looked like a huge hand, stretching toward the flickering lamplight, about to grab it. Meanwhile, another group of disciples from the Violent Crimes Division appeared on the scene. It was none other than Earth Bureau Unit 3, led by the young merfolk captain, and assigned to the same task as Unit 6. Upon arriving and seeing that Unit 6 was already on the move, the young merfolk captain waved his hand scornfully. A black, spherical object shot out, landing in the middle of the manor and then exploding loudly. His subordinates grinned viciously and they threw similar objects, resulting in more booms. The explosions alerted the Night Dove operatives in the manor, and they ran out into the open ready to fight. In the blink of an eye, Unit 6's plan to quietly infiltrate the manor and take out the hideout chiefs was foiled. Su Qing frowned. Unit 3 was obviously interfering with Unit 6 on purpose. In fact, one of the exploding objects landed a short distance away from him. As the Night Dove cultivators scattered, fire started to spread, causing both flames and smoke to rage. Soon the haze of smoke became so thick it was hard to see. However, the sound of fighting, yelling, and explosions continued to fill the manor. Eyes glittering coldly, Su Qing ignored Unit 3 and sped through the haze of smoke, his killing intent surging. His right hand shot out, and his dagger slashed through the throat of a Night Dove cultivator, a middle-aged man in the 6th level of chi condensation. As his blood sprayed out of his destroyed throat, terror filled the man's eyes. Su Qing took his sack and let the corpse drop to the ground. Speeding onward through the smoke, his dagger glittered as he closed in on another Night Dove cultivator. His dagger slashed through the cultivator's neck, but his expression remained the same as ever. The body dropped dead, whereupon Su Qing took the sack and moved on to find a third target. Events unfolded rapidly. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, the sounds of screaming and explosions grew more intense. At a certain point, Su Qing stopped in place, then leaped backward just in time to avoid a wind blade that shot past. The wind brushed back his hair, revealing his wolf-like eyes. Dashing in the direction the wind blade came from, Su Qing found 2 Violent Crimes Division constables, one from Unit 6, the other from Unit 3, working together to fight someone from Night Dove. The Unit 3 disciple didn't look happy to see Su Qing. As for the Unit 6 constable, he was sincerely delighted to see him. On this night, they were truly working together as a team. Su Qing, this guy, is in the 8th level of chi condensation. There were already 2 mangled corpses on the ground. As for the Night Dove cultivator, when he saw Su Qing coming, he backed up as if he planned to flee. He was too late. Su Qing burst forward with explosive speed. To the shock of the Unit 6 and Unit 3 disciples, he closed the distance in the blink of an eye, appearing right in front of the Night Dove cultivator, his dagger slicing toward the man's throat. Blood sprayed everywhere as the Night Dove cultivator's head flew off of his shoulders, and the corpse fell to the ground. The Unit 3 constable's face looked ashen, and fear flickered in his eyes. He had seen strong people before, but it wasn't common to see someone who could kill an 8th-level opponent in one blow. Not daring to stick around, the Unit 3 disciple sped away. As for the Unit 6 disciple, he took a deep breath. Feeling similarly shaken by Su Qing's gaze, he clasped hands, bowed deeply, then disappeared into the smoke. Su Qing glanced at the 3 corpses on the ground. Leaning over to grab their sacks, he dumped their contents into his own bag, his face remaining expressionless the whole time. After taking the sack from the 3rd corpse, Su Qing brushed off his hands and was about to leave. However, that was when the dagger in his hand suddenly shot at high speed toward the corpse's forehead. The speed was incredible, and the move came with completely no warning whatsoever. However, the corpse moved, sliding to the side so quickly that Su Qing's dagger didn't hit anything. The corpse floated into a standing position, and its eyes opened, revealing sinister coldness as it stared at Su Qing. "What gave me away?" Su Qing looked at the corpse and replied, "I've seen a lot of mangled corpses. Your disguise wasn't realistic." "Is that so? Well, I suppose that makes you unlucky." The corpse rubbed its face, removing some of the blood and grime and revealing the features of a middle-aged man. Then he blurred into motion, heading towards Su Qing, and unleashed the power of the great circle of chi condensation. This was one of the hideout chiefs, a cautious man who had hoped to disguise himself as a corpse and then slip away when the moment was right. Never could he have guessed that someone would see through his ruse. However, he was also ruthless. Knowing he didn't have a lot of time to work with, he attacked with full force. Spirit power fluctuations erupted from him, making 9 flame serpents that rushed viciously towards Su Qing. Every serpent was strong enough to rip apart someone in the 9th level, and as they circled around Su Qing, he realized it was the highest level of power he had seen from anyone in the chi condensation level. However, Su Qing didn't provide much of a reaction. Waving his hand, he summoned countless droplets of water that thrummed with the energy of the forbidden sea. As soon as they appeared, the water droplets converged, creating the image of a crocodile. It was vicious and covered with countless scales, with a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. Looking very lifelike, it roared and shot toward the 9 flame serpents. As they clashed, a boom rang out, and the extent of Su Qing's sea-forming scripture divine ability became manifest. In the initial clash alone, his crocodile devoured 5 of the flame serpents, and though 4 remained, it didn't seem the sea-forming scripture would have trouble dealing with them. Then, to the utter shock of this cultivator in the great circle of qi condensation, Su Qing strode forward, his energy and blood surging to create a spectral hobgoblin. As it roared, Su Qing shot forward like an arrow. "You're not an ordinary 7 blood eyes disciple." The night dove chief's pupils constricted as he sensed immense danger. Shooting backward, he waved his hand to unleash the blue glowing light of a talisman treasure. Not bothering to see if it worked as expected, he turned and fled. Unfortunately, he had used that blue talisman treasure a few too many times. Its light had faded, and the power it unleashed wasn't amazing. A blue ghost hand appeared, pulsing with a bit of the power of Foundation establishment as it closed in on Su Qing. Su Qing could sense that this talisman wasn't particularly amazing, but he still dodged out of the way. The hand followed him, making it impossible for him to chase the night dove chief. However, he didn't seem anxious about that. Stepping to the side, he merely glanced at the fleeing chief. "The poison still hasn't kicked in," he said. The night dove chief's face fell and his heart started pounding. Of course, that only caused the poison to kick in faster. He suddenly coughed up a mouthful of black blood. At the same time, his face started turning greenish-black. "Poison!" He staggered as the poison exploded within him, causing his internal organs to melt. Eyes shining with madness, he used a secret magic, slamming both of his palms onto his chest. Flames burst out all over him as all the latent energy within him was unleashed to suppress the poison. A moment later, the greenish-black coloration on his face faded away. Saving himself had come at great cost, and he looked visibly drained. However, there was only one thing on his mind at the moment: escaping with his life. With that, he started moving even faster than before. At the same time, Su Qing once again dodged an attack from the giant ghost hand. Then he started moving like a lightning bolt, heading right toward the hideout chief. However, at almost the exact same instant, an intense sensation of deadly crisis filled him, and his expression flickered. Pupils constricting, he threw himself backward just in time to avoid a razor-sharp chakram, which emitted a piercing whistle as it whizzed through the air. If he had reacted even a moment too late, it would have sliced right through him. Flying through the night behind the chakram was a person who completely ignored Su Qing and headed straight toward the night dove chief. It was the sinister young merfolk captain of Unit 3. "Trying to take credit for my work," Su Qing said, his eyes turning very hard. Whoever killed the hideout chief would get 80 spirit stones, and it went without saying that they would be credited with meritorious service for the sect. If Su Qing hadn't encountered the hideout chief and hadn't started fighting him, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But he had already seriously injured the man and was about to lay hands on him. At that very moment, this merfolk captain launched his own sneak attack, which was an obvious attempt to take credit for Su Qing's work. Su Qing's eyes burned with killing intent. However, because of the giant blue hand summoned by the talisman treasure, he didn't have time to do anything. Just as the young merman was about to launch his final killing blow, Su Qing performed an incantation gesture. Instantly, a host of water droplets rose around the merman, transforming into a jellyfish. "What is this crap?" the young merman sneered, instantly summoning a defensive shield to block the jellyfish's attack. However, as soon as the jellyfish hit the shield, it shattered. The young merman had obviously underestimated Su Qing's jellyfish. As the shield collapsed, the jellyfish once again turned into a host of water droplets, which then took on the shape of a huge net, locking the young merman in place. The merman frowned as his chance to nab the hideout chief vanished. In fact, the chief had already fled about 9 meters away. Su Qing took advantage of that moment to burst into motion, while simultaneously allowing the huge hand to slam into him from behind. Boom! Blood sprayed out of Su Qing's mouth. However, he used the momentum of the blast to pick up more speed, blazing past the merman and becoming a series of afterimages that closed in on the hideout chief. As he neared, he lifted his right hand, within which glittered his black iron skewer. Around then, the young merman broke free of his constraints. Eyes glittering coldly, he sneered and waved his hand, causing his chakram to streak past Su Qing and toward the hideout chief. In the blink of an eye, it was closing in on the target. However, right in that critical moment, the iron skewer became a black streak that shot forth with even greater speed. It was like a black lightning bolt that screamed through the air, passing the chakram and stabbing into the back of the hideout chief's head, then emerging from his forehead. Then a scream rang out as the chakram arrived, slicing through the chief's neck and sending his head flying off in an explosion of blood. The man was dead. Ignoring the chakram, Su Qing dashed forward and grabbed the flying head. Then he spun and looked coldly at the very frustrated young merman. Not waiting for Su Qing to speak, the young merman gritted his teeth and growled, "Who the hell do you think you are to take credit for my work?" Eyes blazing with killing intent, he reached out to grab the chakram as it flew back to him, and then took a step toward Su Qing. Su Qing stood there with the hideout chief's head in his hand, his eyes burning with equally intense killing intent. He didn't say a word. He was already prepared to start fighting and had even crushed a poison pill and dispersed it into the wind. At the same time, his shadow stretched out. All the young merman had to do was take another step forward, and he would step right onto it. Once he did, the shadow would unleash a torrent of mutagen, and Su Qing would attack. Su Qing was confident that, in the heat of the moment, he would be able to kill his opponent quickly. However, even as the young merman's foot moved through the air, and right before it stepped onto Su Qing's shadow, a cold voice rang out from the surrounding haze of smoke. "And who the hell do you think you are to take credit for Unit 6's work?" The captain strolled out from the haze, an apple in his hand. Behind him were about 4 additional constables from Unit 6, all of them holding severed heads. As for the captain, he reeked of blood, and his eyes were so cold it seemed like they could freeze the air. The young merman stopped moving. His foot did not touch the shadow. Instead, he slowly backed up, keeping his eyes on the surrounding Unit 6 constables. A few breaths of time passed during which a few constables from Unit 3 arrived. The tension mounted until finally the young merman laughed coldly. Looking at Su Qing with raw killing intent, he said, "You can keep your life for now, but I'm not going to forget this." Flicking his sleeve, he left, followed by the other constables from his unit. Su Qing's eyes revealed nothing about what he was thinking as he stood there quietly. After the young merman was gone, the captain smiled at Su Qing, eyed the severed head he held, and said, "You did well." He offered Su Qing an apple, "My treat." Su Qing accepted the apple and took a bite. It was sweet, but also tasted like blood. Su Qing swallowed, then looked at the young merman off in the distance. The constables of Unit 6 were all very excited. The captain killed one hideout chief, and Su Qing killed the other. We're gonna be rich. 20 spirit stones is just the beginning. Our bet paid off. Su Qing, let us help you with all those severed heads. It's easy to tell which ones you killed. They all have their throats slashed. Normally speaking, the constables were all cold and detached. But right now, they were genuinely happy. It really felt like being part of a team. The captain looked pleased and had seemingly forgotten about the constables that had fallen in the fighting. Waving his hand, he said, "Let's withdraw." Carrying their spoils of battle, they left the manor and went through the night back toward the Violent Crimes Division. All Unit 6 constables looked at Su Qing with newfound respect. It wasn't just any person who could kill a hideout chief the way the captain did. And not just anyone would dare to argue with another unit's captain over getting credit. As for who tried to steal credit from whom, it didn't matter. The fact that Su Qing ended up prevailing showed how strong he was. As usual, Su Qing was walking toward the back of the group. However, at a certain point, the captain slowed down until he was walking next to Su Qing. In his hand was a blue talisman treasure, which was the same talisman the Night Dove chief had used to unleash the giant ghost hand. Now that the chief was dead, that talisman was considered a battle trophy. Although it was tattered, it could probably be used 1 or 2 more times. "Take it, you earned it." Su Qing was a bit surprised, but he took it. Then he looked over and saw the captain looking at him with a profound look in his eye. "Did I show up a bit too early just now?" the captain asked. Su Qing didn't respond. "There were too many people around," the captain continued. "Not just people from the Violent Crimes Division. There were also non-human Dharma protectors. I'm not saying you can't kill him, but the merfolk are indeed allies. That said, they have a rebellious streak. I heard that a few years ago they were planning an armed uprising. The Ampik folks found out about it and used the great competition to crush them. But in the end, allies are allies. You have to think twice before moving against them openly. I'm not sure what that fish is up to, but I do know that he occasionally shakes his Dharma protectors and goes off on his own. The captain smiled broadly as he trailed off. Su Qing put the talisman away, then took out 2 pairs from his sack. One of them he gave to the captain, who looked surprised. Taking a bite from the other pair, Su Qing asked, "Captain, do non-humans have a different body structure than us humans?" "There are some differences. For example, let's talk about poisons. There are some poisons that humans can't deal with but don't work on non-humans. And the opposite is true. There are some substances that are powerful medicines to us humans but will kill a non-human." The two of them exchanged a glance, but said nothing further. As Su Qing walked along, something cold stirred within his eyes. There was one line that he maintained, and if anyone crossed that line, he would think of a way to kill them, no matter what. Even if he wasn't strong enough or had no way to actually kill that person. Until they died, the matter would be like a fish bone stuck in his throat. Anyone who threatened his life crossed the line. It was like that in the slums. It was like that in the scavenger base camp. And it was like that in Seven Blood Eyes. The only difference was that he had to be a lot more careful here. He had to find the right opportunity to strike a deadly blow. The young merman had crossed the line in a way even worse than the tavern keeper from Plank Spring Way. In fact, the young merman was on about the same level as Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. Therefore, Su Qing had to think of a way to kill him as soon as possible. After Unit 6 got back to the Violent Crimes Division and the operation was officially concluded, everyone dispersed. However, Su Qing didn't go back to his Dharma boat. Instead, he hid nearby and waited. About 2 hours later, he caught sight of the young merman. However, he wasn't alone, and as Su Qing observed cautiously, he realized that the strongest of the energy fluctuations surrounding the group were in the Foundation establishment level. Su Qing's guard went up further. At the same time, there was no sign that the young merman had been poisoned. Su Qing was certain he had released the poison, so it confirmed what the captain said. The young merman also had powerful people protecting him, so Su Qing didn't get near him. After confirming the general direction he left in, Su Qing departed. That night, the trap set for Night Dove by the 7th peak was sprung, and it was a complete success. 17 hideouts in the port district were all vanquished, and any groups working with Night Dove were similarly exterminated. Some of the assistant directors even joined in on the action. Many of Night Dove's powerful experts were killed. It was the same in the other districts of the city. Nearly 2,000 members of Night Dove died, and when it came to accomplice organizations, there were even more deaths. The heads of the leaders were hung on the city walls the next day, and the gory image shook the region. Casualties in the Violent Crimes Division weren't low. 300 disciples died. 2 of them were the young man and woman Su Qing had met on the day he first reported for duty. But overall, it was a resounding success. The purging caused the city to calm down a bit in the following days. Even the infighting among disciples eased up. When the rewards were distributed, Su Qing ended up with 138 spirit stones, which was an unprecedented level of wealth. Of course, it made him even more on guard against greedy interlopers. If anyone tried to rob him, then he would kill them. With so many spirit stones, Su Qing started thinking that the materials he had previously thought to be so amazing actually weren't very good quality. And then he started thinking about what better materials he could purchase for his Dharma boat. During the 2 days that passed after the operation, Su Qing kept his eye on the young merman. He followed him on a number of occasions, but the Dharma protectors were always with him. Su Qing never had an opportunity to make a move. Thankfully, he was a patient person. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, he had the day off and was working on his cultivation in his Dharma boat when someone sent him a message. It was an invitation, and the person who sent it was none other than Zhou Qingpeng, one of the disciples in his group when he officially became a disciple of the 7th peak. "Junior brother Su Qing, I finally got those ghost-longing horseshoe crabs. Not many, only 2, but that's better than nothing. I was thinking that our little group that joined the sect together have drifted apart. So I invited Li Zaimai and Su Ziohui to dinner tonight. Why don't you join us? I'll bring the ghost-longing horseshoe crabs to give to you." The message seemed sincere. As Su Qing thought about it, he considered how the young merman hadn't been affected by his poison, and realized that the ghost-longing horseshoe crabs would probably come in very handy. After checking his work schedule to confirm he didn't have a night shift, he replied to the message saying that he would come. Then he continued with his cultivation. Before long, it was evening. Su Qing opened his eyes and calculated the time, then left his Dharma boat and headed to the restaurant to meet Zhou Qingpeng. It was a fairly famous place located in an expensive-looking two-story building not far from the port. Su Qing had never gone inside, but he had seen it in the commercial registry list in the Violent Crimes Division. Based on that, he knew that the restaurant was owned by the Coast Guard Division. The Coast Guard Division was very different from the Violent Crimes Division. They were actually more similar to the Patrol Division, except they patrolled the sea and not the land. Nearing the restaurant, Su Qing looked around cautiously before entering. A waiter noticed Su Qing immediately and called out a warm greeting. When Su Qing said he was meeting friends in one of the private rooms, the waiter led him up to the second floor. The room Zhou Qingpeng had reserved was in the very back and was not open to the public. Only 7 Blood Eyes disciples could use it. Nearing the room, Su Qing heard the sound of Zhou Qingpeng and the others laughing and chatting. "Elder brother Zhou, this is my first time here. I've heard it's really hard to get a reservation, and in fact, they don't even let ordinary disciples book private rooms. They have 3 specialty dishes, right? Supposedly, they're all really beneficial for your cultivation base." "Nah, it was easy to get a reservation. This place is owned by the Coast Guard Division, and since I'm a disciple from there, it's simple for me to book a spot. If you ever want a reservation, Ziohui, you just let me know. I'll handle it for you." "Aw, thanks, Elder Brother Joe, cheers." The waiter opened the door to the private room, and Su Qing looked inside to see a table spread with all sorts of dishes. 3 people were already seated around it. There were 2 women and a man. The young man was obviously Zhou Qingpeng, who beamed as he held his glass of alcohol up to the charming Su Ziohui, who was offering him a toast. Last was Li Zimai, who looked just as reserved and cautious as she had in the past. In fact, she even seemed somewhat nervous. When Su Qing appeared, the 2 young women looked at him in surprise. "And who are you, elder brother?" Su Ziohui asked, her eyes shining. She had obviously taken note of Su Qing's good looks and intense spirit power fluctuations. Zhou Qingpeng grinned and got to his feet, but didn't say anything. It was actually Li Zimai who, after looking at Su Qing for a moment, hesitantly asked, "Is that you, elder brother Su Qing?" As it turned out, she recognized him at first glance. In response to Li Zimai's softly spoken words, Su Ziohui's eyes went wide, and she looked closer at Su Qing. It was little wonder she didn't recognize him. In her memory, Su Qing was covered in filth and grime. But the person who had just stepped into the private dining room was tall and slender, with long black hair that flowed past his shoulders. There was something indescribably elegant about him, and of course, his face was nothing short of entrancingly handsome, like something from a sculpture. Almost pretty. He had dashing, angular eyebrows over cold, profound eyes. Combined with his spirit power fluctuations, he was the type of person no one would dare to underestimate. "It's me," he said with a nod. A flush crept up Su Ziohui's face, and she quickly took a drink from her raised cup to mask her shock. Meanwhile, Zhou Qingpeng burst out laughing as he hurried forward to formally receive Su Qing. "Junior brother Su Qing, please have a seat." Su Qing clasped hands in greeting, then sat down. Usually, other disciples in the sect seemed cold and brutal to him, but in the presence of these 3, he felt warmth. That said, all of them had clearly changed during their time in the sect. Zhou Qingpeng seemed to radiate happiness, but Su Qing could see the exhaustion he tried to hide in his eyes. What was more, there was something about him that made it obvious he had gone through some trying times and had grown up as a result. Su Qing couldn't put his finger on what exactly was different about Su Ziohui, but he felt like she had somehow come to resemble the women in the feathered tents back in the scavenger base camp. Li Zimai seemed to have changed the least. She was still cautious and seemed to lack self-esteem. There was more vigilance in her gaze than before, as though she wouldn't let her guard down no matter who she was around. Time slipped by slowly but surely as they chatted. Su Qing didn't say much, but the atmosphere was homey, and even he warmed up to the conversation a bit. This small group had not been in the sect long enough to become completely cold to each other. Most of the conversation was between Zhou Qingpeng and Su Ziohui. Li Zimai was like Su Qing and didn't say much, and when she occasionally looked at Su Qing, her lack of self-esteem really showed. Eventually, after Zhou Qingpeng had downed a few drinks, he sighed and said, "I knew a bit about this sect before joining it, but actually being a member comes with a very different feeling. In 7 Blood Eyes, it's not easy to live a good life. If you slip up even once, you'll end up dead. The rest of you probably feel the same, right? Oh, by the way, you never mentioned which department you got assigned to, junior brother Su Qing. I got sent to the Coast Guard Division. Ziohui has some skills, which is why she already managed to buy a Dharma boat. She was assigned to the dispatch division. Off to the side, Su Xiaohui smiled and nodded, though there was something complex about her smile that Su Qing couldn't quite read into. "I'm in the violent crimes division," he said softly. He still wasn't used to this environment. It seemed the complete opposite of the cold and brutal world outside. "Violent crimes division," Su Xiaohui said, her eyes lighting up. Even Li Zimai looked envious. Although she wasn't dressed like a grimy scavenger, she still wore the clothes of a commoner and was inclined to avert her gaze from others. It wasn't lost on her that she was the only one out of the group of 4 that didn't have a Dharma boat. Sitting there, she felt like she was under a lot of pressure. "Wow, you're in the violent crimes division," Zhou Qingpeng said. "I heard your division was involved in a big event a few days ago. The heads of a bunch of Night Dove leaders were hung from the city walls afterward. There must have been thousands of them. Everyone was talking about it. Hey, junior brother Su Qing, I haven't forgotten how strong your projection of energy and blood was during the entrance assessment. Does that mean you were a part of the violent crimes division operation the other night?" Zhou Qingpeng looked quite excited. When he ran into Su Qing a few days before, he had sensed Su Qing's spirit power fluctuations and had realized he'd gotten stronger. Now he was curious to find out more. When Su Qing didn't respond immediately, Zhou Qingpeng quickly continued. "Although, a large-scale operation like that was probably really dangerous. I know you excel at body cultivation, junior brother Su Qing, but magical techniques are what really count. Since you're new to the sect, staying alive and furthering your cultivation are the most important things. I'm sure you'll have other opportunities in the future to show what you're made of." Su Qing could tell that Zhou Qingpeng was picking his words carefully so as not to say something offensive. Truth be told, Su Qing got a good feeling from these 3. They all seemed genuine, without malicious intentions. That was the main reason he'd agreed to come, other than the ghost-longing horseshoe crab. In response to Zhou Qingpeng, Su Qing nodded, but didn't offer any further explanation. "The 7th Peak's Violent Crimes Division is just like the Coast Guard Division," Zhou Qingpeng went on. "We both have a lot of fierce people as members. Oh, hey, junior brother Su Qing, I heard someone say that in that big operation the other night, there was one disciple who really stood out. I'm pretty sure he's in the Celestial Bureau. I forget his name, but people are saying he killed a hideout chief who was in the Great Circle of Qi Condensation. He was the only one in the entire operation who did something like that and wasn't a captain. For him to kill someone that strong means his C-forming scripture is probably at the peak level. Meritorious service of that sort is definitely going to earn him a promotion." Zhou Qingpeng's eyes were full of admiration. At this point, he wasn't digging for information. He really was just feeling envious. As far as he was concerned, the story he just told couldn't possibly have anything to do with Su Qing. Su Qing was strong in body cultivation and could perform energy and blood projections, but after Zhou Qingpeng started cultivating the C-forming scripture, he realized it was strong enough that using it to kill body cultivators would be an easy thing. And of course, the Violent Crimes Division was full of many powerful experts. Although he had sensed the spirit power fluctuations of the C-forming scripture on Su Qing when they ran into each other at the medicine shop, it didn't even occur to him that Su Qing could possibly stand out among all the other experts in the Violent Crimes Division. "I heard about that too," Su Xiaohui said, carefully serving some food to Su Qing and Zhou Qingpeng. "Everyone was talking about it a few days ago. The fellow you just mentioned is in Celestial Bureau Unit 6. It was absolutely true that disciples from all of the departments in the 7th Peak had been talking about the trap the Violent Crimes Division had sprung on Night Dove. And everyone had been talking about the outstanding figures who played key roles in the operation. Su Qing was actually surprised by this. He had been completely focused on trying to find an opportunity to kill that young merman and hadn't been paying attention to much else. This was his first time encountering the sect's rumor mill, and it was also his first time hearing anything about promotions. "Well, it doesn't have anything to do with us 4, Zhou Qingpeng sighed. To people like us, just staying alive is the most important thing." As he spoke, he gingerly rubbed his thigh where he had a wound that wasn't quite healed yet. Looking over at Su Qing, who still wasn't saying much, he said, "Junior brother Su Qing, you shouldn't be so reclusive. It's a personality trait that you need to change. You should learn how to be more flexible. For instance, give some gifts to your boss. Do that and you'll get someone to watch your back. It'll up your chances of survival." Su Qing just nodded. He wasn't good with words and wasn't sure how to respond to Zhou Qingpeng. As the meal continued, he spent most of his time listening and not talking. As for Zhou Qingpeng, he seemed to be reverting to his old self before he joined the sect. Chatting and laughing, he often raised his drink for toasts. Eventually, when Zhou Qingpeng was obviously a bit drunk, he started bragging a bit about his accomplishments. For example, he said that he had a good relationship with his boss in the Coast Guard division, and then he went on to talk about some of the friends he had made at work. He explained about some of the important connections he'd made, and then told Su Xiaohui that he would help her expand her social network. On several occasions, he reminded Su Qing to work on his personality traits. He also told Li Zimai that the Coast Guard division had some odd jobs that needed to be handled, and that he would recommend her. My boss promised me that as long as I score well on my next review, he'll recommend me to elder brother Ding Xiaohai. You know elder brother Ding, right? People call him the #1 qi condensation cultivator on the 7th peak. Zhou Qingpeng seemed very pleased with himself, and Su Xiaohui offered plenty of flattering words in response to his bragging. Su Qing even smiled and offered a toast to Zhou Qingpeng. The atmosphere in the room was only getting warmer and friendlier. Su Qing had no dislike of Zhou Qingpeng. After all, everyone had their own style of living. The fact that Su Xiaohui already had a Dharma boat went to show that she must have some skills of her own. As for Li Zimai, though she wasn't a big talker, Su Qing had noted how quickly she recognized him, which meant she had keen powers of observation. They ate and drank together for about 2 hours. It was dark outside, and Zhou Qingpeng was even more drunk than before. Finally, it came time to part ways. Zhou Qingpeng handed over the ghost-longing horseshoe crabs, and when Su Qing tried to pay for them, he waved his hand dismissively. Business is good for my clan. Consider the crabs a gift between friends. Su Qing looked at the ghost-longing horseshoe crabs in the bag, and then at the sincere look on Zhou Qingpeng's face. After some thought, he decided not to force money on Zhou Qingpeng. Instead, he simply clasped hands and offered thanks. They left the private room, walked out of the restaurant, and stood outside the entrance. Looking at Su Qing, Zhou Qingpeng smiled and said, "All 3 of you should come visit me whenever you can, and I'll do the same. We all joined the sect at the same time, so we should keep in touch. At the very least, we can have a few people to trust in this cold, indifferent organization. Maybe that'll be the key to us making some progress. Say, Junior Brother Su Qing, I'm in the Ground Bureau of the Coast Guard Division." "What Bureau of the Violent Crimes Division are you in?" "The Celestial Bureau." Su Qing's response seemed to sober Zhou Qingpeng up a bit. Su Xiaohui also seemed surprised. "Celestial Bureau," Zhou Qingpeng exclaimed. "Hey, that's the same bureau as the famous fellow from the operation the other night. He was in Unit 6. Which unit are you in, Junior Brother Su Qing?" Su Qing looked at Zhou Qingpeng and Su Xiaohui, then over at Li Zimai. He hesitated. "I'm also in Unit 6. Zhou Qingpeng's eyes went wide. Looking flabbergasted, he said, "You're in the same unit as that famous guy. Hold on, wasn't he also surnamed?" Even Su Xiaohui, who seemed to be the last in the group to pick up on things, suddenly realized the implication. "There are usually 20 people in a unit," Zhou Qingpeng muttered. At this point he was completely sober. Li Zimai also looked shaken. However, back when she first saw Su Qing enter the room, her acute senses had detected the scent of blood and gore. Everything went quiet for a long moment. Then Zhou Qingpeng threw his head back, laughed, and clasped hands to Su Qing as if to mask his surprise. Su Xiaohui had a dazed expression on her face and looked like she wanted to say something to Su Qing, but ultimately decided not to. Soon the group parted ways. As for Zhou Qingpeng, after he was alone, he shivered briefly, and then his eyes shone with incredulity. Taking out his identity medallion, he sent a message to someone he knew, asking how many people surnamed Su were in Celestial Bureau Unit 6. Su Qing watched everyone go, then turned to leave. However, after taking only a few steps, he sensed something unusual and looked back in the direction of the restaurant. A petite figure stood at the entrance, nodding over and over again while discussing something with one of the waiters. The waiter looked irritated. "I know you're a sect disciple. That doesn't mean you can cause trouble whenever you want. Your group finished eating and we cleared the room, and now you're asking to take the leftovers with you." The petite figure was Li Zimai. She had gone back hoping to get the leftover food, but hearing the waiter's explanation, she now looked embarrassed. Su Qing walked over. As he neared, Li Zimai sensed his approach and turned to look at him, her face bright red. Then her face went pale and she started trembling from embarrassment. "You shouldn't have cleared the room so quickly," Su Qing said to the waiter. The waiter looked at him. He had seen many disciples come to this restaurant and could sense that Su Qing was the type that wasn't worth trifling with. His attitude became very respectful. "You're right, we shouldn't have." He hurried back into the restaurant and then came out shortly thereafter with a to-go package that he handed to Li Zimai. Li Zimai mumbled a thanks, then stood there awkwardly. The reason she'd left and then come back was that she didn't want any of the others to see her asking for leftovers. Now, her feelings of shame caused her to gnaw her lips so bad it started to bleed. "Don't worry about it," Su Qing said. "There's no need to waste food. When I was young, I ate a lot of food that people had left to be thrown away. Sometimes I had to fight with others just to get those leftovers." Li Zimai looked at Su Qing and opened her mouth to speak, except she couldn't think of what to say. As the wind blew, the moonlight shone down, revealing a deep scar that ran along her neck, normally covered by her hair. Looking at her, Su Qing was reminded of the little girl back in the scavenger camp. What was more, he could detect the strong aura of mutagen on Li Zimai. Disciples who didn't have dharma boats usually didn't have a very big income, but that was only compared to disciples who did have a dharma boat. When compared to the common citizens, even disciples with a low income were still considered fairly well off. Considering that, Li Zimai shouldn't be in this condition. The only explanation as to why she would be so frugal was if she was saving every last merit point to eventually buy a dharma boat. After a moment, Su Qing took out a few of the white boluses he had concocted. He put them in Li Zimai's hands. "Keep up the good work. I look forward to the day when you can get that dharma boat." With that, he turned and walked off. Su Qing knew that no matter how much he helped Li Zimai, in the end, what would truly determine her fate was her own choices. Li Zimai stared at Su Qing as he left. Then she looked down at the white boluses, and a deep warmth rose up in her heart. In fact, it was such a cold world and the sect was such a brutal place that this was the first time she had felt such warmth. After a very long moment she looked up, and there was deep gratitude in her eyes. She was thankful for the white boluses, but even more than that, she was thankful for the words of encouragement. She had her pride, and because of that, she didn't like people pitying her. In fact, she rejected all expressions of sympathy. But right now, she needed encouragement. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'm going to get that dharma boat." Time passed, and soon, the 10th month was half gone. It should have been cold dew, but because Seven Blood Eyes was located next to the sea, the days were still hot. It was only after the sunset that the wind turned cold. It was the same with the sea, as if the sinister cold on the seafloor would follow the moonlight up into the world above, and eventually fill cultivators with the malicious iciness of winter. As the wind blew, moonlight spilled over the port district and the bluish limestone that paved the streets. The light of the moon also fell on Su Qing, who was on his way back to his berth after a long day of work. He walked tall and straight in his gray robe, his long hair swaying around him. From a distance, he looked like a lonely figure under the moon in a scroll painting. However, the frigid wind made him feel very cold. What was truly cold was not his body, though, but his memories of life in the slums. It was like a scorch mark on a painting, even if ink was used to cover up that scorch mark and no one noticed it. The scorch mark was still there. As the frigid wind blew, Su Qing started walking a bit more quickly. Half a month had passed since his reunion dinner with Zhou Qingpeng and the others. During that time, he reported in for duty regularly at the Violent Crimes Division, just like before. The promotion Zhou Qingpeng had mentioned never happened, but Su Qing didn't care about that. As far as he was concerned, cultivation was the most important thing right now. His sea-forming scripture was at the peak of the 7th level, not far from the breakthrough point. He was in a similar position with the sea and mountain incantation, being close to the 8th level. It filled Su Qing with anticipation. Given his current battle prowess, once he broke into the 8th level with both techniques, he could absolutely crush the version of himself that existed before coming to Seven Blood Eyes. Although being in the 8th level wouldn't make him strong enough to defeat Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior in a fair fight, if he used his shadow and laid an ambush, he would at least be able to hold his own for a time. "Soon," he murmured, his eyes narrowed. Right now, he urgently needed to kill both Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior and that young merman. When it came to the former, he knew that he just needed to wait for a bit longer until he was stronger. As for the latter, he continued to seek the right opportunity. Unfortunately, despite shadowing the young merman almost every day for the past half-month, the Dharma protectors never left his side, making it impossible to make a move. On one occasion, the merman did as the captain had mentioned and went off on his own, but he used some special item to mask his presence, making it impossible to follow him. Su Qing continued to search patiently, but to no avail. After that incident, he came to the conclusion he should try to plant something on the merman to make it easy to track him. Going forward, I should do the same with any opponent I have to deal with like this. He would treat this new challenge just like he'd handled the old challenge of dealing with corpses. Eventually, he reached his berth in Harbor 79. On his way back, he didn't become the subject of any malicious gazes, nor did anyone cause any trouble for him. He hadn't been in Seven Blood Eyes for very long, but he had already carved out a reputation for himself. Because of that, few people dared to target him. He took out his Dharma boat, and the moment it appeared, it smacked down onto the water with a splash, sending waves out in all directions. The boat was very impressive now, being more than 60 meters long and 9 meters wide. It was pitch black in the moonlight, emanating a black glow from its scaly surface. With the vicious crocodile head on the prow, it really did look like a gigantic crocodile. The open mouth had countless razor-sharp teeth in it, and its eyes glowed with a mysterious, intimidating light. If one looked closely, it was possible to see that there was an outer layer of scales, beneath which were more scales. The boat had a special keel running its length that made it extremely tough. As the wind whipped around it, the Dharma boat looked like a giant beast resting in the water, exuding a threatening aura. The boat's hold was much bigger than before, as was the cabin. It now had a location for rest, cultivation, and even a special medicinal plant laboratory. There was also a greenish light that flowed back and forth across the boat, almost like a living thing. That was something that made the Dharma boat much more durable. Most importantly, there was a large open spot in the deck that was currently empty, but had clearly been set aside for a special reason. So far, Su Qing had spent over 100 spirit stones, using mid-level materials to upgrade his Dharma boat to Class 6. The open spot in the deck had actually cost 10 spirit stones. The reason was that a very unique item had caught his eye. It was a whale skull. Once set into the deck, it would make the Dharma boat much tougher and would push it past Class 6 and to the peak of Class 7. Unfortunately, the whale skull was shockingly expensive. After all, it was considered a high-level material. In order to purchase it, he would need a full 200 spirit stones. It seemed like a ridiculous price. But after going back several times to examine the whale skull, he finally gritted his teeth and decided that he would buy it. Once my cultivation base reaches the 8th level, I'll buy that whale skull and push my Dharma boat to Class 7. Then, I'll go out into the open sea. Boarding his Dharma boat, he sat down cross-legged to start his session of cultivation. The wind blew all night. By morning, it seemed so tired that it faded into nothing. Then the sun shone down, causing Su Qing to open his eyes to a new day. Now that they didn't need to investigate Night Dove, things were a lot more relaxed in the Violent Crimes Division. Occasionally, the Patrol Division would encounter situations they couldn't handle and would request support. In fact, when Su Qing showed up for roll call, Celestial Bureau Unit 6 was given just such a support request. Not many people went on the assignment. It was the captain and 5 others, including Su Qing. As the captain led them out onto the street, he explained the details. As it turned out, the Patrol Division actually needed help dealing with the Dispatch Division. The Dispatch Division and the Pilot Assistance Division were 2 of the most important parts of the port. Dispatch was responsible for all the dispatch orders for incoming and outgoing watercraft. Pilot Assistance was responsible for assisting ships and boats that wanted to enter the port. Every single harbor in the port had a bureau of each division, and today there was an issue in Harbor 96. The Dispatch and Pilot Assistance divisions in that harbor were at odds. Over 100 members of Pilot Assistance had gathered at the Dispatch Division office to protest, and thus, the Dispatch Division had put in a request for help from the Patrol Division. The Patrol Division, not confident that they could handle the situation, had in turn put in a request for support from Violent Crimes. After hearing this explanation, one of the Unit 6 constables sneered and said, "The reason for all of this is that the Dispatch Division in Harbor 96 should have given an incentive payment to Pilot Assistance this month. Instead, Dispatch only gave 20% of the usual. Put anybody in the shoes of Pilot Assistance, and they'd react the same. Disciples in Dispatch and Pilot Assistance get a regular salary," another constable said. "But Pilot Assistance provides a lot of help to Dispatch, which results in Dispatch getting extra money on the side. Because of that, it's customary for Dispatch to give incentives." Although this was Su Qing's first time hearing about this arrangement, it made sense to him. "You know why?" another Unit 6 constable said. "It's because Harbor 96 Dispatch just got a new overseer. It's that conclave disciple Zhao Jingheng." Su Qing's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. "Yeah, he's a conclave disciple, so he thinks he can change all the rules. I've heard that historically, Dispatch and Pilot Assistance split things 50-50. But this Zhao Jingheng decided to change it to 90-10. No wonder the pilot assistant's disciples are angry. Su Qing listened to the talk as they proceeded to Harbor 96's dispatch division. When they arrived, Su Qing saw that the division headquarters itself looked like a large sail laid on the ground. It was made up of numerous structures and had numerous Dharma boats docked off to the side. In front of the main gate, over 100 pilot assistant's disciples had gathered. A group of dispatch disciples was also there, and they were shouting at each other. The atmosphere was tense, as if fighting might break out at any moment. A large group of other random disciples had gathered to watch the commotion. There were also patrol division disciples present, trying to mediate between the two groups. However, neither side seemed willing to back down. It seemed the slightest spark could cause a complete blow-up. When the patrol disciples saw the group from violent crimes arrive, they breathed sighs of relief. As for the crowd of onlookers, they parted to allow violent crimes through. The captain munched on an apple as he completely ignored patrol as well as the two opposing factions. Instead, he found a suitable place off to the side to sit down and watch things play out. After all, the Violent Crimes Division only needed to get involved once deadly fighting broke out. Until that happened, they didn't have to lift a finger. The other violent crimes constables followed suit, including Su Qing. After he sat down, he looked over the crowd. He didn't spot Zhao Jingheng, but he did see one familiar face. Standing at the front of the group from the Pilot Assistance Division was the same pudgy young man who had given Su Qing some condensing spirit leaves at the medicine shop some time ago. His name was Huang Yan. In fact, Huang Yan seemed to be speaking for the Pilot Assistance disciples. "You dispatch bastards. You might as well make it impossible for us Pilot Assistance disciples in Harbor 96 to make a living. Without our monthly incentive, we won't be able to keep up with cultivation and pill concocting. How are we supposed to survive like that in this deadly city? You're literally trying to get us killed. Well, since we're dead either way, we might as well take you out first." Huang Yan wore an ordinary gray robe, but he stood with his shoulders square and his chest out. He had a very vicious expression on his face, and when he yelled, his neck bulged. The person standing in the leadership position of the dispatch disciples was a middle-aged man who wore the same gray Taoist robe as Huang Yan. He actually wasn't from the dispatch division in Harbor 96, but rather was one of Zhao Jingheng's retinue. Given Zhao Jingheng's status, there was no way he would go out to deal with a matter like this one, so he'd had one of his followers handle it. Middle-aged cultivator's eyes shone with cold light and extreme annoyance. He had been a follower of Zhao Jingheng for a long time, and normally speaking, off-peak disciples treated him with a lot of respect. He had brushed shoulders with so many conclave disciples that he'd come to forget his own status. As far as he was concerned, these gray-robed disciples weren't even worth thinking about. That was especially true considering he knew, without a doubt, that Zhao Jingheng wouldn't change his mind about his decision. "One incense stick's worth of time," he shouted. "Anyone who wants to live had better screw off before then." When he said that, the pilot assistant's disciples' killing intent surged, and when the dispatch division saw that, their eyes shone with cold light. Each disciple in 7 Blood Eyes was someone who had slaughtered their way out of a den of wolves and didn't ever feel the need to rely on the help of others. To people like that, killing wasn't an unusual thing. "You want us to screw off? Screw your grandpa." Eyes wild, Huang Yan lunged forward in a headbutt, moving at top speed. At that point, the tension exploded, and the two sides started fighting. Booms rang out, and the fluctuations of magical techniques shot out in all directions. Su Qing looked on as hundreds of people started battling, and blood flowed. The patrol division disciples who had been trying to broker a peace just backed up. At the same time, Su Qing and the other violent crimes constables remained seated. Su Qing looked over at the captain, who just kept eating his apple and occasionally cheering as he watched the fight play out. "There are way too many people involved in the fight," the captain said between cheering. "A chaotic battle is the most dangerous type. Let them fight it out for a bit, then we'll step in and calm things down. Besides, the sect doesn't want two divisions slaughtering each other. I'd say there's an 80 or 90% chance the bigwigs send someone to interfere." There were already casualties on both sides. As the screams and booms rang out, Su Qing spotted Huang Yan in the crowd, eyes bloodshot as he fought wildly. He was in the 7th level of qi condensation, which made him particularly deadly in the fighting. Before long, Su Qing noticed the ringleader of the dispatch division, the middle-aged cultivator, backing up while glaring venomously at Huang Yan. Taking advantage of the fact that Huang Yan was facing away from him, the man waved his arm, causing a flying dagger to shoot out from his sleeve. The dagger was made from a special material. It was translucent and glowed with a faint blue light. Apparently, it was poisoned. Huang Yan was so caught up in fighting that he had no idea the dagger was heading straight toward his neck. However, Su Qing saw it. Eyes narrowing, he flicked his right hand, causing a drop of water to fly with shocking speed toward the flying dagger. When the water hit the dagger, a loud pinging sound rang out and the dagger was knocked off course, speeding just past Huang Yan. Expression flickering, Huang Yan looked at Su Qing and nodded. Then a malevolent expression overtook his face as he turned toward the middle-aged cultivator, howled, and threw himself forward. "Damn it!" The middle-aged cultivator growled and he tried to leap back, but Huang Yan blocked his path, then lunged forward with a headbutt. The resulting crunch was drowned out by the general chaotic sound of the battle, but Su Qing saw the middle-aged cultivator's face distort with pain before he launched a counterattack. The fighting continued, and the casualties grew. Off to the side, the captain glanced at Su Qing, and then smiled enigmatically. Su Qing didn't say anything, and in fact, looked away from Huang Yan. He had interfered in the fighting simply because Huang Yan had been so generous with those condensing spirit leaves. As the fighting between the two departments grew more intense, a booming voice rang out like thunder. "Everybody stand down." A figure appeared overhead, walking through the air and emanating a terrifying aura that weighed down on the entire area. All of the disciples below looked up in shock. "Time to get to work," the captain said quietly, getting to his feet. He really looked like he was ready to enforce the law. Su Qing and the others joined him. At that exact same moment, the figure from above resolved into a young man in a violet Taoist robe. He wasn't particularly good-looking, and his eyes weren't unusually threatening. But there was something shocking about him as he hovered in midair, looking down coldly at the disciples from both sides of the conflict. All of the disciples from dispatch and pilot assistants stopped in place, expressions of reverence on their faces. One person in the crowd recognized who this person was and immediately offered a respectful salute. "Greetings, Honor Guard Li." Meanwhile, Zhao Jingheng flew out from inside the dispatch division, looking a bit taken aback. Once outside, he bowed respectfully to the figure hovering above. Su Qing was shocked by all this. He could sense the spectacular fluctuations coming from this Honor Guard Li, and given that his memories of Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior were still fresh, he was certain Honor Guard Li was much stronger. Meanwhile, Honor Guard Li looked around coldly and said, "I'm here with orders from Elder Zhao. All disciples from the Dispatch Division and the Pilot Assistance Division who participated in the fighting will be fined 3 months' salary. Furthermore, pilot assistants will receive the same incentive as before. Zhao Jingheng, Elder Zhao wants to see you. Come with me." Although Honor Guard Li kept his face expressionless when he looked at Zhao Jingheng, inside, he was feeling very disappointed. He knew exactly what the problem was here. Zhao Jingheng was the grandson of an elder, but he was also an idiot. He was a conclave disciple with a spectacular background, but his off-peak assignment had resulted in a huge mess. How could such a spectacular elder have such an idiot for a grandson? Honor Guard Li looked away and made a grasping gesture. As a result, Zhao Jingheng was snatched up, his face pale with shock and terror. Then the two of them disappeared in the direction of the 7th peak. With him gone, the issue between dispatch and pilot assistance was resolved. However, there were still bloodstains and corpses to deal with, and as a result, despite the issue being over, there was still visible animosity in the eyes of the disciples on both sides. The captain stepped forward, took a bite of his apple, and then said, "All right, everyone, show S over. We'll be leaving now. By the way, that fellow just now, Honor Guard Li, is one of Elder Zhao's favorites. Li Dialing. Considering that he personally came to take away Zhao Jingheng, I'd say Zhao Jingheng is in for some rough treatment." With that, he walked away. Unit 6 went with him. As Su Qing left, he looked over his shoulder and saw the disciples from the Pilot Assistance Division clustered around Huang Yan. Su Qing looked away and the sea breeze lifted his hair back, revealing his eyes. From the way they glinted, it was clear he knew whom to show gratitude to and whom to feel resentment against. His shift came to an end as the evening sun cast its light over the lands. Once off duty, Su Qing spent some time shadowing the young merman. Unfortunately, the opportunity he sought never presented itself, so eventually he went back to his Dharma boat to work on his cultivation. Life was a lot more interesting in 7 Blood Eyes compared to the scavenger base camp, but Su Qing kept the same routine when it came to cultivation. He knew that cultivation was the foundation of everything. Furthermore, His plan to go out on the open sea required a cultivation-based breakthrough, and that point kept getting closer and closer. It won't be hard to achieve that cultivation breakthrough, but I still need to upgrade my Dharma boat to Class 7. Unfortunately, I still can't afford the materials I need. Pulling out a jug of alcohol, he took a sip. He wasn't sure when exactly he had acquired a taste for alcohol, but he liked it now. As he drank, he considered going to Plank Spring Way to try to earn some cash. After thinking about it, he decided not to, until he figured out a way to get rid of that innkeeper once, and for all, he needed to stay away for fear of beating the grass and startling the snake. He pulled the jug up to take another sip, which was when he realized it was completely empty. It was currently dark, and he wasn't inclined to go out to buy more alcohol, so he put the jug down to the side and closed his eyes to meditate. Time passed, and soon the moon was up, casting its light over the water. The bay looked almost like a mirror in the night, both mysterious and beautiful. In those nighttime circumstances, Su Qing opened his eyes from meditation and looked outside his boat. Shortly thereafter, footsteps could be heard on the shore. And then, Su Qing's eyes glittered as he heard a familiar voice from outside. "Brother Su Qing, it's me, Huang Yan, from the Pilot Assistance Division." Hearing this, Su Qing stepped out onto the main deck. There on the shore, bathed in moonlight, was a pudgy young man whose gray Taoist robe was both wrinkled and stretched taut over his belly. Seeing Su Qing come out, Huang Yan grinned. After the fight earlier that day, something wonderful ended up happening to him, and he went out drinking. After getting a bit tipsy, he started thinking about the events of the day, then did some asking around to find out Su Qing's name and his birth number. Then he'd come here to offer thanks in person. "Brother Su Qing, I'd like to say thanks for what you did today." Su Qing gave him a nod, then said, "There's no need for thanks. You already gave me some condensing spirit leaves at the medicine shop a while back." "Huh?" Huang Yan said, looking stunned. Then he thought back and apparently remembered the incident. Shaking his head, he said, "You helped me because I gave you some condensing spirit leaves." "Not some," Su Qing said, sounding very serious. "You gave me 7 stalks in total." Huang Yan blinked a few times, looked more closely at Su Qing, and then laughed. He had originally planned to simply come here and say thanks. He hadn't intended to get into a conversation. At the most, he'd figured he would give a small gift as a token of gratitude, but now he was coming to feel that Su Qing was more amusing than he'd realized. Reaching into his sack, he pulled out 2 palm-sized eggs. They were pale, and in the light of the moon, they seemed to sparkle. "Brother, you're an interesting guy. Let me treat you to an egg." With that, he tossed the egg toward Su Qing. Unexpectedly, it passed right through the Dharma boat's defensive shield. Surprised, Su Qing waved his hand, causing a host of water droplets to appear, surrounding the egg and stopping it in mid-flight. Looking at it closely, he saw that even after passing through the defensive shield, it was still whole, without even a crack on its surface. He looked back at Huang Yan. "What is it?" "A little thingy." Grinning, Huang Yan put his right index finger in his mouth, licked it, and then used it to poke a hole in the egg. Instantly, a fragrant aroma filled the area, which Su Qing could smell even inside the defensive barrier of his boat. Huang Yan then swirled his finger around inside the egg, put it to his lips and took a sip, a rapturous expression on his face. Meanwhile, the wonderful aroma caused Su Qing's cultivation base to stir, and he felt an instinctual sensation inside of him telling him that the egg was something absolutely extraordinary. After a moment of hesitation, he tried to poke a hole in the egg with his finger, only to discover that the egg was extremely tough. He tried again with more force, but nothing happened. Confusion shone in his eyes. Huang Yan burped, then said, "You need to use your spit. These thingies are strange. If you don't use spit, it's way too hard to break them open." Su Qing hesitated for a moment, then sucked his finger for a moment before poking a small hole in the egg. Instantly, the same amazing aroma spread out, causing his cultivation base to stir even more dramatically. In fact, his flesh and blood seemed to thirst for a higher level of life. Panting slightly, Su Qing put the egg to his lips and took a sip. Then his eyes went wide and he took a much bigger sip. Huang Yan stood off to the side, staring in anticipation as he waited for Su Qing to react. However, even after a very long moment passed, Su Qing didn't say anything. "Well," Huang Yan said, "what do you think? Was it good?" "Yeah, pretty good." Su Qing felt something warm flowing through him, and he even had beads of sweat on his forehead. "Well, that's a given," Huang Yan said, looking pleased. "It took a lot of effort for me to get these eggs. My elder sister loves them, but today I'm letting you try them." By this point, Huang Yan was starting to get a sense of Su Qing's personality, so he took a deep breath and didn't say anything further. Neither did Su Qing. He just continued to drink from the egg. Time passed and silence prevailed. Huang Yan sat on the shore, Su Qing sat on his boat. Neither seemed inclined to disturb the other. It was a fantastic feeling as far as Huang Yan was concerned. He felt more and more relaxed, and as the effects of the alcohol he'd consumed earlier continued to take hold over him, his eyes became a bit unfocused. Then he looked at Su Qing sitting in the moonlight and couldn't help but say, Su Qing, you're pretty good looking. But that's not going to help much if you fall in love. It'll make girls feel insecure. When you look like me, though, girls can have true peace of mind. Su Qing didn't respond. He just sat there sipping the egg, making sure not to lose a single drop. Huang Yan didn't seem bothered by Su Qing's silence. Stretching out on the beach, he put his hands on his chest and looked up at the moon. It seemed like he was thinking about a specific person. He sighed. Do you have a special someone, Su Qing? Su Qing was getting a sense of Huang Yan's personality. He was obviously a warm and casual person. Su Qing shook his head. See, I told you, with your good looks it won't be easy to woo a girl. It's different for me. In fact, I don't mind telling you that today was a really great day. Not because of the reward I got from the pilot assistance division after that fight. No, it's because I found out my elder sister really does care about me. That's why I went drinking tonight. You know what, Su Qing? I've been sending my elder sister gifts for years now. Today was the first time she asked me to get something for her. She said to do it soon as possible. This is so amazing, she actually likes me. Su Qing hesitated. He had never fallen in love and wasn't even sure what to do if it happened. But he did know that something seemed off about what Huang Yan was saying. Glancing curiously over at Huang Yan, he could see that he was a bit drunk, and also that it wasn't the time to question him. Then he thought back to what the shopkeeper at the medicine shop had said about Huang Yan chasing some girl for 7 or 8 years. After a moment, Su Qing knew what he should say. Taking another sip from the egg, he spoke from his heart and said, "Congratulations." Looking even happier, Huang Yan patted his stomach. I can tell you mean it, Su Qing. Not like other people. You know what? I'm the kind of person who repays kindness with kindness. You helped me out today, and I'm going to make sure you didn't help me in vain. Huang Yan sat up and took out a small leather sack. He tossed it to Su Qing. Scrambling to his feet, he continued, there are some Dharma boat materials in there. Consider them a gift to commemorate our newfound friendship. Well, I'm taking off now. Let's hang out again sometime. Swaying a bit as he walked away, he took out his identity medallion and started to send a message. Su Qing simply watched him sending a message and chuckling as he left. He was glad he hadn't said anything more than he did. After Huang Yan disappeared in the distance, Su Qing went back inside the cabin. Meanwhile, the sea breeze blew past Su Qing and through his hair, carrying his scent through the night toward the main city. The wind passed numerous structures and blew through street after street. It witnessed all the bustling activity. Eventually, it started to lose power toward the south part of the city, where the sixth peak rose high, and it finally stopped upon reaching an old man who was quietly climbing the stairs that rose up the peak. If the wind had a spirit and it could return to Su Qing and report what it saw, he would recognize that man. It was none other than Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. The moonlight revealed that his face was more wrinkled than before. In fact, every wrinkle seemed deep and full of melancholy. Altogether, they made the patriarch seem full to the brim with bitterness. After trudging to a spot halfway up the mountain peak, he stopped outside of a mansion grotto. It had an arched stone doorway surrounded by verdant green grass. Above the doors, the name of the grotto was carved in calligraphy as flamboyant as dancing dragons and swirling phoenixes. Idle House. The name alone made it obvious that whoever occupied this mansion grotto was calm, tranquil, and elegant. They were the kind of person who liked to pick flowers and relax indoors. Outside of the grotto, Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior took a deep breath, then clasped his hands and bowed. Fellow Taoist Idol Cloud, do you have time to visit with an old friend? The bright moon illuminated the dome of heaven, revealing a few idle clouds. However, outside of the mansion grotto on the sixth peak, Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior actually looked gloomy in the moonlight, and that gloominess amplified the worry visible on his face. The truth was that he didn't care too much for the wealth he'd lost. The real reason he'd coughed up blood was the fury of seeing his sect headquarters ruined. The spirit stones that had been out for the taking had been placed there mostly for decoration. And what he worried about now was that his enemy was in 7 blood eyes, getting stronger and stronger. As anxiety mounted within him, he looked at the mansion grotto and noted how silent it was. There seemed to be no response to his greeting. Enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn. Then he heard a sigh from within. Long time no see, Master Free Spirit. Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior's actual Taoist name was Master Free Spirit. However, it had been years since people in the area started referring to him as a patriarch. Thus, there were only a few people who called him by his Taoist name. When Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior heard that name, a flicker of reminiscence appeared in his eyes, and he sighed lightly. Long time no see, he said. The closed stone door of the grotto rumbled open, revealing inky darkness within, out of which strode an unusual-looking person. He was an old man who walked with a very rigid gait. He wore a deep blue Taoist robe, had long gray hair, and he had a very somber expression on his face. As he walked up to Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior and stood in front of him, the wind caught the edge of his robe and it swayed to the side, revealing that he didn't have legs of flesh and blood. Instead, his legs were a mechanical construction. They glittered with blue light and seemed especially cold because of the moonlight. The blue-robed old man looked up at the clouds in the sky and softly said, "It has indeed been a long time, and thus, I have to wonder what brings you here today." Although they were standing on equal footing, it actually seemed like Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior was positioned beneath him as an inferior. After a moment of bleak silence, Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior explained the situation with Su Qing. "A huge calamity struck my sect recently. Before leaving, the little thief stole all of my resources. He poisoned everyone, set a number of fires, and basically burned the headquarters to the ground. If he was just some ordinary brat, I wouldn't care as much. But after spending a huge amount of money to run a background check, I found out that he joined 7 Blood Eyes. Not only that, but he's doing well here. Now I'm sitting around worried all the time. I can't stop thinking about accounts I read in the ancient records a few years ago. I've actually studied many ancient stories, and as it turns out, people like him usually have an unbeatably strong destiny. I was really an idiot to go after him with only 2 grand elders to back me up. I should have taken the whole sect with me. I should have gone all out to destroy him. Either that, or I should have turned weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk and just apologized. Sadly, I missed that chance. Anyway, based on my analysis, I'm absolutely certain that after he grows up, he'll be impossible to stop. And then I'll be killed beyond the shadow of a doubt. I just know in my heart that once he rises to prominence, he'll rain fire and blood down on your 7 Blood Eyes and completely destroy it. The ancient records all say that things will play out that way. And then, all it will take will be a single word from him, and my Golden Vajra Warrior sect will be reduced to ashes." Having finished his explanation, Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior hung his head bitterly. The blue-robed old man stood there with a strange expression on his face as he listened to Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. Then he shook his head. "Master Free Spirit, after all these years, you really have taken to jabbering. You think a nobody like that has an unbeatably strong destiny, that he's going to rain fire and blood on 7 Blood Eyes and wipe the sect out of existence. With one word, he'll destroy your Golden Vajra Warrior sect. It sounds to me like you're imagining things." The patriarch sighed. "You don't get it, I trust my instincts." Seeing the patriarch like this, the old man in blue shook his head again. The truth was that the two of them didn't have some sort of deep friendship. Other than a few interactions years ago, they weren't very close. "What peak is the kid assigned to?" "The 7th peak," the patriarch replied quietly. "According to the background search I paid for, his name is Su Qing, and he's in the Violent Crimes Division. It doesn't matter what division he's in, he's still just an off-peak disciple. That said, though we treat them like venomous bugs in a jar, and even allow them to fight and kill each other, the fact remains that there are certain sect rules which just can't be broken." Seeing the patriarch look even more dejected than ever, the old man in blue sighed again. Whatever. Look, I can have him roughed up, then force him to give you back the things he stole. If he doesn't have them, then I'll take everything he owns." With that, he took out his identity medallion and sent a message. Then he pointed at Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. "Okay, it's done. As for you, spend some time working on your cultivation. Even after all these years, you're still just an early foundation establishment. You haven't made any progress at all. Stop spending all your time reading those random ancient records. Stop sitting around jabbering all the time. If you keep this up, you're going to develop an inner devil." The patriarch seemed to have more to say, but held his tongue. Things hadn't turned out exactly as he'd hoped, but he could see that no amount of arguing was going to do any good. Sighing inwardly, he clasped hands and bowed. // asterisk. The night passed without incident for Su Qing. At dawn, he opened his eyes from meditation and looked at the sack lying next to him. Last night, Huang Yan had given it to him as a gift, and inside were 3 mutant beast parts. There were 2 diamond-shaped skulls and 1 feather. All of them glittered with red light, indicating that they came from the same creature. Their auras were extraordinary, but unfortunately, they wouldn't boost the toughness of his boat. Instead, they were related to magical techniques and speed. I wonder how many spirit stones I could get if I sold them. Also, I've built up about 1,000 white boluses. After organizing his belongings, Su Qing left the Dharma boat and headed to the vendor cart where he usually purchased breakfast. The vendor was a burly, middle-aged man with no cultivation base. Like most common citizens in the capital city, he was a frank and straightforward person, and when he saw Su Qing approach, he grinned. He liked this handsome young man from the Violent Crimes Division, and felt that he didn't have the vicious air that most Seven Blood Eyes disciples did. Su Qing didn't even need to put in an order. As soon as he walked up, the vendor served him some stuffed buns, steamed eggs, and a plate of pickled vegetables. Su Qing thanked him and sat off to the side, picked up some chopsticks and started eating. He had become accustomed to eating with chopsticks lately. After finishing the meal, he put some spirit coins onto the table, then left for the Violent Crimes Division. Morning roll call was a simple thing. He just had to swipe his identity card on the limestone stele at the Celestial Bureau, then wait for the formalities to end. Su Qing was used to the process. After the roll call, he checked the duty roster, then headed back out onto the street. As he left, other disciples in the Violent Crimes Division offered polite greetings. After what happened with the Night Dove operation, he had a good reputation in the division. Out on the street, Su Qing bought a few pears to eat as he headed toward the medicine shop. His plan was to sell his white boluses, and also see how much he could get for the materials Huang Yan had given him the night before. Afterward, he hoped he would have enough to purchase that whale skull. Before long, he caught sight of the shop he usually frequented to buy and sell medicinal pills and plants. It was as bustling as it usually was. Su Qing was a regular at this location, so as soon as he entered, the busy shopkeeper noticed him and smiled. "Haven't seen you for a while. Are you here to buy plants or sell pills?" "Sell pills." Smiling even more warmly, the shopkeeper glanced at the pills Su Qing handed him, then started counting out 20 spirit stones. "You're not even going to inspect them?" Su Qing asked. The shopkeeper waved his hand dismissively. "There's no need to inspect your pills." Su Qing nodded. He was absolutely confident that all the pills he'd concocted were of the highest quality. After taking the spirit stones, he clasped hands and left. After he was gone, the shopkeeper took out a Jade slip and sent a message to his boss. Then he yelled at one of the shop clerks to come over, put the medicinal pills in a box, and take them to the second peak. The clerk knew how important the pills were to the boss, so he packed them up quickly, then ran out of the shop at top speed. Before long, the box had been delivered to a young woman in her mansion grotto on the second peak. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old and wore a pale orange Taoist robe. Sitting down with the box, she examined the pills. In the light of the sun, her skin was as fair as snow. Her eyes glistened, and her long black hair was coiled in a bun like that a princess might wear. The bun was fastened with a pearl hairpin, but a few strands of hair hung down and drifted about her face. This young woman was the owner of the medicine shop, and was the same person Su Qing had passed by some days ago when leaving the shop. As she examined the pills, the young woman made a faint exclamation of surprise, and her eyes widened. "I can't believe they have such a high level of purity." Although she could achieve the same quality, she couldn't do it every single time. All of a sudden, she felt her sense of competitiveness stir. "If a 7th peak disciple can do this, then so can I after all. I'm a cultivator who specializes in the Tao of alchemy." She waved her hand, causing several medicinal plants to fly over to her. Looking very serious, she started a session of pill concocting. As she was trying to match Su Qing's efforts, he was walking the street toward the shops where the 6th peak disciples offered equipment forging services. As he neared one shop in particular, his eyes flickered with suspicion. Perhaps it was a misperception, but he felt like the vendors from the 6th peak were, intentionally or otherwise, glancing at him out of the corners of their eyes. Before, it hadn't been like this. "Are they watching me?" Eyes narrowing, he put his guard up even more, and at the same time gave up his plan to visit the 6th peak vendors. Instead of purchasing any materials, he headed back to Harbor 79, where he went into a session of cultivation. Days passed and nothing happened. Su Qing was still feeling suspicious, though, and was cautious everywhere he went. He also went through the sixth peak vendor area a few times to see what would happen. He never again got the sense he was being watched. However, he didn't let down his guard. A few days later, after confirming repeatedly that it was safe, he picked a shop that had never participated in the strange behavior and headed in that direction. He really did want to upgrade his Dharma boat, and virtually all the places to buy the necessary parts were run by the sixth peak. They essentially had a monopoly on that business in the port district. Even if something strange was going on, Su Qing was ready to give it a shot. Keeping his guard fully up, he hurried down the street toward the shop. However, that was when he heard a familiar voice. Su Qing. He looked over his shoulder to find that Huang Yan was a short distance behind him. Huang Yan waved enthusiastically as he hurried to catch up, his fat jiggling up and down as he ran. Su Qing, guess what? My elder sister returned my messages again today. Ha 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 ha. Come on, I'm in such a great mood that I have to treat you to some eggs. With that, he reached out to grab Su Qing. Su Qing was inclined to step back to avoid him, but then he thought about those fantastic eggs, as well as the materials Huang Yan had given him, and he hesitated. I need to sell some things. Sell things? Are you low on money? I can give you some. Su Qing shook his head. Well, fine, Huang Yan said, looking no less happy than before, but at least let me come along. Afterward, the two of us are going to splurge on eggs. Deal? Okay, deal. Huang Yan was clearly dead set on sharing his good mood. Looking around, he pointed at one of the nearby shops. That's a good one. I've been there a few times. It was the same shop Su Qing had intended to go to, and it was busy inside. In fact, Su Qing recognized one of the customers. It was none other than Zhang San, who was there buying some things. When Su Qing entered with Huang Yan, Zhang San noticed, smiled, and called out a greeting. Come on, let's go, Huang Yan said. Hurry up and sell your stuff. Remember, the eggs are the most important thing right now. Su Qing found the shopkeeper and walked over without any hesitation. It was a big shop with 2 floors. There were all sorts of mutant beast materials up for sale, and all of them were very expensive. As Su Qing neared the counter, the shopkeeper looked up. He was middle-aged, with a mustache shaped like the character Chinese letter and a shrewd look. Upon seeing Su Qing approaching, he smiled. Hello, fellow disciples. What are you looking to buy? I want to sell some materials, Su Qing said calmly, then took out the materials from his sack. He didn't just take out the items Huang Yan had gifted him. He also took out some things he'd taken from criminals he'd killed recently. The shopkeeper looked at Su Qing, then at the items. Muttering to himself, he looked at something behind the counter, then peered at Su Qing. Face darkening and eyes turning hard, he said, There's something wrong with these items, young friend. A few days ago, the Golden Vajra Warrior sect got in touch with our 6th peak and reported a big heist perpetrated on their sect. They lost a lot of resources, and the items here are listed on the incident report as belonging to the Golden Vajra Warrior sect. Young friend, are you really trying to sell me stolen goods? What's the meaning of this? Don't tell me that you have something to do with the Golden Vajra Warrior sect heist. Could it be that a disciple from the magnificent 7th peak actually robbed the Golden Vajra Warrior sect? It was obvious that the shopkeeper was deliberately speaking louder and louder, until every disciple in the entire shop could hear what he was saying. By the time he was done talking, the shop was completely silent, and everyone was looking at Su Qing and the shopkeeper. Su Qing didn't really care, though he was sighing inwardly. Despite all his caution, he had been unable to avoid this situation. Obviously, this whole thing was connected to Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior, and it caused the killing intent in his heart to grow even more intense. And now he knew that some important person from the 6th peak was actually working with the Patriarch. He glanced at the shopkeeper's throat, as well as all the materials on the shelves, and then looked out at the open sea. His eyes started to turn cold as he tried to decide whether to just leave or get into an argument. As he deliberated, Huang Yan's eyes turned wide and slapped his hand onto the counter with a loud thump. Stolen goods? Is this a stolen good? Huang Yan picked up one of the mutant beast skulls he'd given to Su Qing as a gift. At the same time, his eyes burned with unprecedented anger, as though he had just been insulted in the most outrageous manner. This freaking thing belongs to me, got it, you bastard. How dare you say that one of my things is stolen? Brimming with indignation, Huang Yan threw the bone into the shopkeeper's face. Huang Yan's voice was loud, and his eyes burned with fury. As far as he was concerned, the shopkeeper was insulting him, not Su Qing. After all, among the things Su Qing was offering for sale were the items Huang Yan had given to him. The shopkeeper's hand snapped up to grab the bone Huang Yan had thrown in his face. His expression was now very grim. Inside, he was thinking scornfully of how Huang Yan had spent 8 years working in the pilot assistance division, all for the purpose of chasing after a girl. The shopkeeper had the feeling this elder sister was probably just a random country farm girl, yet Huang Yan wouldn't give up on showering her with expensive gifts. If Huang Yan was just looking for trouble, the shopkeeper had no problem giving it to him. "You're absolutely correct," the shopkeeper said casually. "They are stolen items. Apparently, you were an accomplice in the Golden Vajra warrior sect heist. Someone report this to the Violent Crimes Division. The perpetrators of the Golden Vajra warrior sect heist have turned themselves in." In response, one of the shop clerks dramatically pulled out a transmission Jade slip, looked at the shopkeeper, and then slowly sent a message to report the incident. The other customers in the shop, who were all disciples from various mountain peaks, looked on with glittering eyes. Disciples who joined Seven Blood Eyes and lived in the environment they did were all clever people. Everyone present could see what was going on here. This matter didn't really have anything to do with the Golden Vajra warrior sect heist, but rather the fact that someone from the Sixth Peak wanted to cause trouble for either Su Qing or Huang Yan, or both. No one in the crowd could tell for sure who was being targeted, but to everyone, it seemed likely that it was Su Qing, as he was the one who had taken out the stolen goods. Not one person said a thing. Everyone just looked on, including Zhang San. Su Qing wasn't paying attention to the bystanders. He was most concerned with Huang Yan and his reaction. The two of them didn't have a very deep relationship, and because of that, he was a bit suspicious as to why Huang Yan was doing this. He was even more suspicious of why the shopkeeper brought up the Violent Crimes Division, and how the clerk made the obviously exaggerated show of sending in a report. Altogether, this didn't seem like a trap set up by Huang Yan to kill him. After all, if Huang Yan wanted him dead, he could have just attacked him directly. There wouldn't be a need to drag the Violent Crimes Division into the situation and complicate matters. To the important people in the sect, offbeat disciples killing each other wasn't worth causing a huge commotion. In fact, this whole thing seemed more like an attempt to pressure him into returning the items he'd stolen from the Golden Vajra warrior sect. Beyond all that, on his approach to the shop, he noticed that there were no intense spirit power fluctuations in the area, which indicated there weren't any powerful experts in hiding. As Su Qing pondered these things, and the shopkeeper reported the matter to the Violent Crimes Division, Huang Yan got even angrier. Violent Crimes Division. Su Qing is in the Violent Crimes Division. Brow furrowed, the shopkeeper said. "Oh, well, knowing the law and breaking it anyway is an even worse crime." Barking an angry laugh, Huang Yan was about to take a step forward when Su Qing, whose suspicions were getting even deeper, held his arm out in front of Huang Yan and quietly said, "This has nothing to do with you, Huang Yan. You should leave." Examining the shopkeeper's throat, he continued, "These things are battle trophies I took from criminals I killed, so stop slandering me. If there's something you want to say it." The shopkeeper's guard immediately went up. Su Qing's reaction made it obvious he wasn't an average person. Truth be told, considering the situation had been communicated to the shopkeeper from the Sixth Peak, he could have simply demanded that Su Qing return the stolen items. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to make a small fortune, and had thus hatched a plan to slander Su Qing. However, Su Qing had seen through his plan, which was very telling. What was more, people who could earn a good reputation in the Violent Crimes Division were generally complicated people. As a shopkeeper, this man had powerful backers. He wasn't like the ordinary disciples, stuck like venomous bugs in a jar. Generally speaking, offbeat disciples would go out of their way to avoid causing problems for him. However, the chill he felt on his throat made him change his strategy. Not wanting to cause further complications between himself and Su Qing, and figuring he'd put on enough pressure already, he decided to simply explain the situation, including the demands of his superiors on the Sixth Peak. Except right at that moment, Huang Yan shouted, "You don't need to help me out, Su Qing. This matter has nothing to do with you. They're obviously targeting me. I know what's going on here. This is the work of Zhao Jingheng. He has a grudge against me and knew I would end up coming here, so he hired you to smear my name." The shopkeeper looked at Huang Yan with an odd expression on his face. Su Qing was also looking at Huang Yan, his eyes narrowed. Su Qing just wanted to resolve whatever the issue was, but Huang Yan had apparently decided that this whole thing was about himself. Smacking the counter loudly, Huang Yan was about to keep yelling when the sound of footsteps drifted in from outside, along with a cold, sinister voice. "Who would dare to perpetrate a crime like this?" Along with the words, A group of people entered the shop. When Su Qing looked over his shoulder at the new arrivals, his eyes narrowed even further. They all wore gray Taoist robes with Violent Crimes Division badges prominently displayed on them. In the lead position was the captain of Unit 3, the very same young merman Su Qing had been shadowing for the past half a month. He had 4 Unit 3 disciples with him. Looking at Su Qing coolly, he said, "Well, if it isn't you." Su Qing didn't respond, but the vigilance in his heart grew to an even more intense level. The Violent Crimes Division had arrived very quickly. What was more, the person to arrive was the very same young merman he'd had issues with in the past. Something seemed suspicious about the situation. Things only seemed to be getting more and more complicated. There were 3 main issues. The first was the shopkeeper trying to pressure him into compensating the Golden Vajra Warrior sect. That said, it was obvious that the situation would be easy to resolve. The second issue was Huang Yan taking the blame for everything, for unknown reasons. The third issue was the young merman showing up, which hardly seemed to be coincidental. Without understanding the details of exactly what was going on, Su Qing didn't want to take action. Meanwhile, the young merman glanced around the shop and the people in it with a look of scorn. The truth was that he had never wanted to join 7 Blood Eyes. The merfolk community wasn't large, but even still, he had a very high status in it, and as a result, had become an arrogant person. What was more, he looked down on humans. When the report came into the Violent Crimes Division, the case had originally been assigned to the Celestial Bureau. However, because it involved a person in that bureau, the case was then transferred to the Earth Bureau. And when the young merman found out Su Qing was involved, he remembered their clash during the big operation and personally took over. Pointing at Su Qing and Huang Yan, he said, "We have the criminal behind the Golden Vajra Warrior sect heist right here, along with his stolen goods. And someone from our very own Violent Crimes Division is in on the whole thing. Arrest them both and take them back for interrogation." Huang Yan, seeing that the Violent Crimes Division was turning a blind eye to the truth, got even angrier. Stepping between Su Qing and the young merman, he shouted, "Are you blind, you idiot? You think my stuff was stolen?" Taking out his bag of holding, he turned it upside down in front of the eyes of everyone present. Instantly, hundreds of crafting ingredients and building materials started pouring out from inside, creating a huge pile. There were all sorts of items from mutant beasts, mostly bones and feathers from the same type of creature. The onlookers gasped in surprise. All of these people had been around the block. They knew that this collection had to be worth thousands of spirit stones. Furthermore, the mere fact that Huang Yan had a bag of holding caused all of their eyes to glitter. "You think my stuff is stolen? Well, what about all this? Did I get all this from the Golden Vajra Warrior sect? This is actually the complete corpse of a windwalker, except for the most precious part, the skull, which I gave to my elder sister. Are you trying to tell me I stole a windwalker?" Even Su Qing was so surprised to see these items that he gasped softly. He'd known that Huang Yan was rich, but seeing all of these things come out of his bag of holding came as a shock. The shopkeeper was starting to feel a headache coming on. The Violent Crimes Division had shown up much more quickly than he anticipated, throwing a big kink into his plan. He looked hesitant. However, once you knock the arrow to the bow, you cannot but shoot it, and therefore he braced himself and said, "The Golden Vajra Warrior sect's report mentioned a windwalker." It seemed like a completely outrageous development, so Su Qing just stood there observing coldly. "Since the skull was also stolen," the young merman said, "and you gave it to your elder sister, that means we have another accomplice. Take them away for interrogation and go arrest the female criminal as well." The 4 Unit 3 disciples immediately headed toward Su Qing and Huang Yan, 1 toward Huang Yan, 3 toward Su Qing. "You're the criminal," Huang Yan shouted, rolling up his sleeves. "Your whole family is full of criminals." Then he stalked toward the disciples. Su Qing looked coldly at the 3 people heading toward him. Before, he'd intended to hold back until he knew exactly what was going on. But since the people from Unit 3 were being so aggressive, he lifted his right hand. Instantly, water droplets filled the area, causing an intense pressure to build up. The disciples from Unit 3 suddenly looked shocked as they realized they were locked in place and incapable of moving. Although these people had been present during the joint operation with Unit 6 against Night Dove, none of them had personally seen Su Qing in action. They had only heard stories. But now that they were experiencing his strength in person, it caused waves of surprise to fill their hearts. "Resisting arrest," the young merman said, smiling to reveal a mouthful of sharp teeth. At the same time, he strode forward, moving so fast it caused a sonic boom in the shop. An instant later, he was in front of Su Qing, reaching out with his right hand to grab his neck. He had long, sharp fingernails, and he moved with such incredible speed that an ordinary person wouldn't have been able to react. However, in the instant before he arrived, a black iron skewer appeared right in front of him. He was fast, but Su Qing was faster, and as Su Qing pulled out the iron skewer, he lifted his right foot and sent his knee flying forward. The young merman pulled his right hand back, just as Su Qing's knee smashed into his own knee. A boom rang out, and while Su Qing rocked in place, the young merman staggered back 5 paces, then looked up with a bloodthirsty gleam in his eyes. Well, isn't this interesting? As he spoke, the ripples of the 9th level of chi condensation erupted from him, and behind him appeared a projected image of a vicious merman wielding a black trident. This wasn't a projection of energy and blood, but rather a natural bloodline power he possessed. Again, he moved towards Su Qing, causing rumbling sounds to fill the shop. They smashed into each other again, then again. 7 or 8 times in a row, they clashed, sending out shockwaves that might have destroyed the shop if it weren't for the spell formations built into it. The surrounding onlookers watched with utter shock. They're so strong. The captain of Unit 3 isn't human. He's got a merfolk bloodline power and battle prowess comparable to a disciple in the great circle of chi condensation from a powerful sect. As for Su Qing, I can't believe he's so astonishing. Remember that story going around about the only non-captain who killed a hideout chief during the Night Dove operation? Now that I think about it, that person was Su Qing. Upon hearing the reaction of the crowd, an enigmatic smile appeared on Huang Yan's face as he huddled in a hiding spot off to the side. Then the smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of fury as he yelled, "Great job, Su Qing. Cut that fish down to size. He should die for trying to frame us. Kill him and we can have fish for dinner." More booms rang out as the young merman was again forced backward, blood seeping out of the corners of his mouth. At the same time, the bloodthirsty look in his eyes grew stronger. To him, fresh blood was very exciting. Besides, he had a trump card that he hadn't played yet. In fact, he put both of his hands together to start an incantation gesture. What he didn't notice was that he had just stepped on Su Qing's shadow. Su Qing's expression had remained placid the entire time, but now his eyes flickered with killing intent, and he was about to make a move. However, that was when several very powerful auras suddenly locked down the entire area. "Wait," the young merman said, a vicious expression on his face. "I can handle this, just watch." However, in that exact moment, an even more terrifying aura suddenly appeared outside the shop. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the other handful of auras that had locked down the area crumbled like dried-up weeds. The young merman's eyes went wide as he looked over his shoulder. Su Qing also looked in the same direction, his pupils constricting. A figure appeared, walking into the shop. At the same time, the cold voice of a woman rang out. "Did someone just say I have stolen goods?" Her voice was like an icy wind that froze everyone in place. Whether it was the young merman or the 6th peak shopkeeper, her single sentence caused everyone to shiver uncontrollably and look at the person who had just entered. She was a young woman, tall and menacing, with bronze skin and long flowing hair. There was nothing dainty and beautiful about her. Rather, she seemed wild and violent. She wore a pale violet Taoist robe and wielded a huge black sword that was almost 2 meters long. As she entered the shop, dragging the sword behind her, the tip caused sparks to fly up off the ground, and it left a huge furrow both in the door lintel and the floor. Seeing her, everyone inhaled sharply. Someone bowed at the waist, then another, until everyone was bowing and clasping hands. "Well met, Second Highness. Well met, Second Highness. Well met, Second Highness." This young woman was like a senior princess on the 7th peak. She had the authority to kill off-peak disciples at her whim, and could even cripple conclave disciples if she wished. She was the Peak Lord's 2nd successor apprentice. At this point, Huang Yan scuttled out of his hiding spot and said, "Elder sister, you're finally here." The Peak Lord of the 7th peak had 3 successor apprentices. One of them was forthright, charismatic, and made friends easily. That was, of course, the 3rd Highness. One of them had a fiery temper and was feared by fellow disciples. That was clearly the 2nd Highness. It wasn't just disciples from the 7th peak who could feel her wrath. Disciples from other peaks could as well. Everyone knew that she had a violent temper as well as a bewildering level of strength. Say one wrong thing to her and she might attack you. Furthermore, over the years, her wrath had been unleashed even on Foundation establishment cultivators from other peaks. A lot of them. Because of her spectacular strength and the fact that she represented the Peak Lord, no one could even attempt to reason with her. She was so domineering that her name was known throughout all of 7 Blood Eyes. Even elders hated running into her, much less ordinary disciples. In fact, she wasn't just famous in the sect. She was even more well-known on the open sea. She had killed too many pirates to count, and there were entire minor species who would tremble upon hearing her name. Now that she was here, her incredible might weighed down on everyone present, even Su Qing. He felt an intense sensation of crisis in his heart, something that reminded him of the spectacular beasts in the Forbidden Region jungle. In fact, she seemed far stronger than Honor Guard Li, to the point where Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior would seem weak in her presence. Su Qing was more on guard than ever and even backed up a few steps out of caution. The threatening sensation he felt from Second Highness was simply too intense and terrifying. In fact, he even looked through the door and out onto the street, but didn't see anyone. Apparently, nobody else in the sect cared about what was happening here. However, Huang Yan didn't seem to feel any of the pressure at all, as if he'd planned all of this and things were going exactly as he'd thought they would. He didn't even try to keep the excitement off his face. Groveling over to Second Highness, he said, "Elder sister, this shopkeeper and that stinking fish said that the things I gave you were stolen from the Golden Vajra Warrior sect. Elder sister, you know that I'm an upright person. I'm sincere, honest, straightforward, genuine, gentle, and considerate. You're the only person I've ever loved. If they want to slander me, fine, I can deal with that. But they cannot slander the gifts I give to you. Slandering my gifts is the same as slandering the love I've shown for you for the past 8 years, Elder." Standing next to Second Highness, the pudgy Huang Yan looked a bit out of place. Whether it was how tall she was or how thick he was, he seemed like a child standing next to an adult. In response to his words, everyone in the shop gaped in absolute shock, including Zhang San. To them, this turn of events seemed almost inconceivable. The shopkeeper looked a bit dazed as he muttered, "Second Highness, is the elder sister you talk about all the time?" The words sounded awkward coming out of his mouth, yet they revealed how the shopkeeper felt inwardly, as though an endless herd of wild horses was trampling through his mind and heart. Most people were familiar with Huang Yan, who was relatively well known on the 7th Peak for being head over heels in love. Everyone had heard the rumors about how he'd been pursuing some elder sister for 8 years, showering her with so many gifts they could fill up entire shops. Because of the details, everyone assumed that there was more to Huang Yan than met the eye. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to survive for so many years with his wealth intact. However, many looked down on him. After all, most people didn't think a true man would debase himself so much for a woman. Therefore, everyone present, from Zhang San to the shopkeeper to the other disciples, were now seeing Huang Yan in a new light. Most of them looked at him with unprecedented reverence, and others seemed outright jealous. Obviously, all of them wished they could have an elder sister like this. It didn't matter if it took them 8 years, 18 years, or even 28 years. Su Qing was also shocked. He looked at the smugly content Huang Yan, then at the domineering Second Highness, and he seemed somewhat dazed. Never in his wildest imaginings could he have guessed that the person Huang Yan had pursued for 8 years was actually the Second Highness from the 7th Peak. Now Su Qing realized that Huang Yan had been so brash earlier because he missed his elder sister. He had intentionally created a scene in the hopes of getting her to show up. Upon hearing Huang Yan's tale of being wronged, Second Highness's eyebrows shot up and she stalked contemptuously past the young merman, who stood there with his head bowed. Huang Yan went with her, keeping his chin stuck up in a good imitation of her contemptuousness. Her attitude seemed to irritate the young merman. He trembled as if he were having a hard time controlling himself. However, his complexion was ashen, and there was fear visible in his eyes. Right now, he was thinking about a massacre that took place in the Merfolk Isles 30 years before. Second Highness had been in the middle of it all, splattered with blood. It took place during the 7th Peak's grand competition. Because humans were evil to the core, and because the magnificent merfolk refused to acknowledge subservience, the 7th Peak chose to have their grand tournament in merfolk territory. The reality was that they used it as a pretense to suppress the merfolk. It was only after that incident that the merfolk and the humans became allies. After that, 7 Blood Eyes had stepped in on numerous occasions to save the merfolk from being exterminated by others. But to many merfolk, the only reason the humans did that was because they were obligated to. In the end, the alliance with humans was a disgrace to them. Despite his chaotic mood, the young merman kept his head bowed and didn't dare to look up. However, in his heart, he was raging, and he vowed to make 7 Blood Eyes pay for the humiliation they had heaped on his people. Seeing the young merman stand there with head bowed, Second Highness seemed even more contemptuous than before. Walking up to Su Qing, she looked at him coldly. Taking a deep breath, he kept a somber expression on his face as he clasped hands and bowed. "Well met, Second Highness." "Elder sister," Huang Yan said, "this is my good friend Su Qing. He got implicated in this whole thing as well." He went on to proudly show off all the items he had just dumped out of his bag of holding. Nodding, Second Highness turned away from Su Qing and stepped to the counter. Lifting her huge sword, she put it down with a thump. The black sword was so huge and heavy that the sturdy wooden counter creaked and half-collapsed. As a result, the sword tip came to point right at the shopkeeper's belly. As it gleamed coldly, the shopkeeper started to sweat, and his face turned pale. Trembling, he said, "Second Highness, You said my things were stolen goods," she asked coolly. The shopkeeper started sweating even more, to the point where his back was soaked. His expression was bitter, and in his heart, he was howling in grief. He had originally thought he could make some money out of all this. Then Huang Yan came along and threw everything into chaos. And how could the shopkeeper have ever guessed that Huang Yan was backed by someone as godlike as this? There was no way he would ever dare to provoke the explosive Second Highness. In fact, not even the honor guard who had organized this entire matter would ever dare to trifle with her. After all, Master Seventh doted on her, treating her like the senior princess of the Seventh Peak. All the shopkeeper could do was stammer, "It was a misunderstanding. Really, Jay, just a misunderstanding. I misjudged the situation. How could those possibly be stolen goods?" Su Qing saw all of this and his eyes gleamed. More than ever, he realized that in the world he lived in, strength was the eternal constant. What was more, Second Highness, words revealed what it truly meant to be domineering. "You didn't misjudge," Second Highness said coldly. "These really are stolen goods, and you know who stole them from the Golden Vajra warrior sect. Me. You have a problem with that." She nudged her sword forward so that it sliced into the shopkeeper's garment and touched the skin of his belly. He shivered from head to toe, and cold sweat poured down his face. Although he wanted to go along with whatever she said, he wasn't sure exactly how to respond. Continuing, she said, "You can tell whoever you work for that I'm the one responsible for the Golden Vajra warrior sect heist. Furthermore, you can tell the Golden Vajra warrior sect that they have 3 days to bring me a satisfactory apology accompanied by a gift." Her words were an obvious threat. Anyone who heard her understood that if the Golden Vajra warrior sect's apology and gift weren't satisfactory, then, soon enough, there wouldn't be anything called the Golden Vajra warrior sect. After clearly establishing how domineering she was, she looked at the items Su Qing had been trying to sell. "Are you going to buy these?" "Why, yes. Yes, I'm going to buy them," the shopkeeper said. Wanting to pant from frustration but not daring to, he quickly took out 100 spirit stones. Then he noticed Second Highness frowning, and he gritted his teeth and took out an additional 100. With 200 spirit stones placed neatly off to the side, he looked at Huang Yan and Su Qing with a pleading smile. Ignoring him, Second Highness picked her massive sword up off the counter and turned to leave. As she passed the young merman, she said, "Get the hell out of my way. You stink like rotting fish." The young merman trembled visibly, but he also backed up a few paces. As she stepped out the door, everyone in the shop clasped hands and joined their voices to say, "Respectful farewell, Second Highness." Su Qing did the same, though he looked up with his eyes to observe her leaving. After she was gone, Huang Yan glanced around at the crowd looking very pleased. Then he slapped Su Qing's shoulder. "You saw that, right?" he said, beaming with delight. "That was my elder sister, my goddess. After this, who would ever dare to slander us? That said, you were certainly on your game, you little punk. You didn't hesitate to stand up for me and even share responsibility. I'm going to remember this. Let me tell you, I'm the kind of person who repays kindness with kindness. Unfortunately, I don't have anything good on me right now. But don't worry, I'll go back and find a good gift to send you later." Before Su Qing could respond, Huang Yan waved goodbye and rushed after Second Highness. "Elder sister, wait for me." Su Qing still felt a bit dazed. After Huang Yan was gone, he looked down at his clothing, then at the dour young merman, whose eyes flashed when their gazes met. Su Qing took the 200 spirit stones from the shopkeeper, who didn't even dare to meet his eyes. Then he left without another glance at the merman. Outside of the shop, he adjusted his clothing and walked off with a dark look in his eyes. Meanwhile, back in the shop, the young merman watched Su Qing leave, his expression unsightly and his heart full of malice. "When someone dares to touch me, even if they survive, they don't stay alive for much longer afterward. Sadly, I rarely get to see them die." With a cold harumph, he flicked his sleeve and left. In his mind, Su Qing was an ant, and would be dead already if it weren't for Huang Yan. Everyone in Seven Blood Eyes deserves to die. That kid took credit for my hard work, so he deserves to die more than anyone else, and he'll be dead sooner or later. The sun shone hot and bright in the dome of heaven. It was noon, so the sun was right in front of the face of the god above. The dazzling light made it difficult for mortals to even look. The god behind the sun seemed to surpass space and time. It didn't matter whether it was day or night. It didn't matter whether one was dreaming or not. It didn't matter if you talked about the past or the future. That god was always there. He witnessed the transformations to the world below. He witnessed all life and death. He witnessed the brutality and chaos that he had brought to the world. Even the burning sunlight seemed more vicious because of that god. It was like the sunlight was more evil, as though it didn't want the current season to leave quietly, the way it should according to the way of nature. Instead, the sun beat down onto the lands below and filled every corner of the Seven Blood Eyes capital city with devastating heat. Even standing in the shade of a tree or beneath the eaves of a building, it would seep in. Not even the sea breeze could dispel it. It was like a poison that had seeped deep into the bones and marrow. It was like something on the hem of Su Qing's Taoist robe. Although that hem seemed ordinary, if you looked closely, you would see traces of powder on it. Like the vicious heat that seeped into heaven and earth under the influence of the god's broken face, that powder sent something deep into Su Qing's flesh and blood. It was moving very quickly, and it seemed ravenous. From the moment it appeared until it seeped into him, only a few breaths' worth of time passed. Su Qing looked calmly down at the hem of his garment, then headed toward his berth. The powder had been placed on his garment by the young merman during their fight. Virtually any other person would probably have been unaware of what happened. After all, the poison was colorless, odorless, and in some respects didn't even count as a poison. But Su Qing was skilled in the Tao of medicine and could already think of 7 or 8 different types of medicinal items that could behave in this manner. It would take some analysis for him to determine which it was. That said, his clashes with the young merman made Su Qing's killing intent even more intense than before. It's about time to do some fish killing. Back at his berth, he stepped onto his Dharma boat and activated the defenses, separating himself from the outside world. Everything became quiet. He sat down cross-legged and ripped the hem off his Taoist robe. After looking at it closely, he performed an incantation gesture with his left hand, causing a small fireball to appear in his palm. The sea-forming scripture relied on water. However, it was common for magic cultivators to master a number of different techniques for backup if nothing else. Even the Jade slip with the technique description had introductions to other techniques. After summoning the fireball, Su Qing sent it toward the ripped hem of his garment, causing it to catch fire. Hissing sounds rang out as it burned, causing a thin smoke to billow up. The flickering flame illuminated Su Qing's eyes as he closely watched the fabric burning. The flames were red, and they burned through the material very quickly, turning the gray fabric into crumbling bits of ash. Within the space of a few breaths of time, it had been completely burned up. Su Qing looked at the ash and sniffed the smoke. It's made from the blood of ghost-longing horseshoe crabs. It's a poison, but at the same time not a poison. The medicinal codex Grandmaster Bai had left with Su Qing talked about ghost-longing horseshoe crabs. They lived in the depths of the sea and were quite rare. Su Qing had 2 of them in his possession, but hadn't found any complementary medicinal ingredients, so he hadn't done anything with them. That said, he knew that their blood could be used to create an incredibly effective medicine. But if prepared in a different way, then in accord with the polarity of yin and yang, the blood's aura would become something loathsome to a wide variety of mutant beasts. It also has the characteristics of morningstar grass. Su Qing closed his eyes to think. When he opened them, their black recesses glittered with incomparable coldness. Grandmaster Bai's codex didn't explain what happened when you mixed those 2 types of ingredients. However, based on Su Qing's understanding of medicinal principles, he knew that adding the latter would amplify the loathsome quality of the mixture. A small amount of that mixture would cause mutant beasts to shy away, but a large amount would attract them with killing intent. If you put that mixture onto a person, it would seep into their aura and invade their flesh and blood. It wasn't a poison, so it didn't cause the symptoms of poisoning to appear. In fact, the mixture could be considered nourishing. As a result, it wasn't something easy to detect. But once it was in the body, getting rid of it wasn't easy. It was something that could stick around for years. Su Qing had experience with a loathsome substance that would attract mutant beasts. The first time he fought with Squad Thunderbolt in the Forbidden Region, Savage Ghost had a bottle in his sack that contained something like that. and Savage Ghost's little bottle was like nothing compared to the substance that had been put on Su Qing's Taoist robe. In fact, they were as different from each other as heaven and earth. Here in the sect, being infected with an aura like this wouldn't be very dangerous, but out on the open sea, Su Qing knew that if he went out to sea with this aura on him, he almost certainly wouldn't come back alive. It was an incredibly devious way of killing someone. It left behind no evidence and was vastly more sinister than the venom of a vapor. Furthermore, it would work even if a lot of time passed. Someone other than Su Qing, without his understanding of the Tao of medicine, would probably die without any idea of who had killed them. But I wonder if you have what it takes to spot my little poison trap, Su Qing thought. Though the young merman had poisoned him, the truth was that the mantis was stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Su Qing had also poisoned the young merman. Similarly, it was an undetectable poison that served as a mark. The difference was that the merman's mark would attract the loathing of mutant beasts in the sea, while Su Qing's mark was a symbol of death for people who walked on the land. Face expressionless, Su Qing collected the ashes of his burned garment, then opened his bag of holding and looked at the medicinal pills he had inside. Then he glanced at the surrounding medicine cabinets. He wasn't extremely skilled in dispelling poisons. Besides, the aura he was infected with wasn't actually a poison, so the powers of regeneration provided by the violet crystal wouldn't be much help. However, what he was good at was dealing with being infected by poisons. Therefore, he took out some poison powders and pills. The pills he consumed in quick succession, then he scattered the powders and inhaled deeply. A violent tremor passed through him, and beads of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. However, he remained seated in a cross-legged position, feeling himself burning up from the inside. Meanwhile, the killing intent in his heart fermented, like the calm before a storm. The poison inside of him burned at his organs, bones, flesh, and blood. He couldn't extrude the aura of the ghost-longing horseshoe crab and the morning star grass. So instead, he would eliminate them with poison, then use his powers of regeneration to regenerate himself. The process took about 4 hours. Round evening time, he slowly opened his eyes, which were completely bloodshot. The poisons within him had been driven out, and along with them went the aura of the ghost-longing horseshoe crab and the morning star grass. After inspecting himself, he looked at the sun outside. "Soon enough I'll be able to have a good night's sleep," he murmured. Standing, he straightened out his clothing and closed his eyes. Eventually, the sun seemed to be moving out of the way for the moon to take its place. Then evening turned dark, and the moon rose. The stars in the sky were like fireflies in a graveyard, hardly enough to provide much illumination. It was a good night for killing. Su Qing opened his eyes. Quietly placing his iron skewer in his sleeve and his daggers in his boots, he checked to make sure he had all of his poisons ready. Then he left his Dharma boat and sped off into the night. The moonlight shone down coldly as he sped through the city like the wind, his eyes as cold as a lone wolf's. The icy sea breeze hit him, rustling his garment and lifting his hair. However, it couldn't purge the city of the unique scent of the marker he'd placed on his target. Eventually, the sound of the wind in his ears became something like a call to death. He was going to be doing some killing tonight. The night wind was a bloody scythe, gory and humid, an ambassador of death that swept through every corner of the city. In the darkness, that ambassador of death moved relentlessly forward, merging with the shadows, then dispersing, foreboding to the extreme as it sought to bring all to despair. Until its relentless progress into alleys of the city caused it to run into a person standing in the shadows. This person wore a gray robe and seemed like someone that blades or needles couldn't harm, and he emitted a frigid energy that seemed to block off the light of the stars. It was suffocating. When the wind hit him, it was like when cold rivers ran into the sea, or when a pack of jackals encountered the king of all wolves. The wind stopped and everything went quiet. The person in gray looked over his shoulder and his eyes were as cold as a deep pool of black water. The wind laughed. It had found something to believe in. A comrade. Hefting its scythe of death, it blew past the figure in gray, stirring his long hair and robe. The wind stronger than usual tonight. Su Qing turned to look through the darkness toward a building. To him, the building was like a coffin looming in the night. It was the home of the young merman. Because he wasn't an ordinary disciple from the 7th peak, he didn't qualify for a Dharma boat and was forced to rent a place on shore. Su Qing watched the place quietly. In the darkness of night, his breathing sounded like a cold, winding stream. He was waiting. Because of the marker he had placed, he knew for certain that the young merman was here. Furthermore, based on what he had learned from shadowing the merman recently, he would likely be going out alone soon, maybe even tonight, considering how bad his mood was. Therefore, Su Qing was inclined to simply wait through the night. Time passed. 2 hours later, when the moon slipped behind some clouds, the breeze picked up, scraping over the house, which was now cloaked in darkness. Because of the coffin-like building, the wind seemed even lonelier, like a hoarse whisper uttered just before death. A figure appeared on the outer wall of the building. His gray Taoist robe couldn't cover up the smell he exuded, which was like the sea, and his green eyes didn't do anything to make him seem less sinister. His robes flapped in the breeze, making an impressive silhouette in the darkness, but at the same time, it almost seemed like a peeled-off layer of human skin. This person was none other than the young merman, who was in an extremely foul mood today because of the humiliation he had suffered earlier. Senior Princess of Seventh Peak, who cares about you? One of these days I'm going to brutalize you. I'll use your body to raise ghostworm maggots. The young merman ground his teeth in fury. His bad mood had caused him to come out a few days earlier than usual. He really felt the need to vent. And the way he did that was have his 2 older cousins make arrangements to bring him, not women, but children. It was a secret he had to keep tightly under wraps. He liked to torture and kill non-merfolk children. That was what truly made him happy. Jumping off the wall, he sped into the night, quickly vanishing. Anyone present who was either watching him or observing him in some other way would lose track of him. It was like he didn't even exist. However, that didn't mean that Su Qing's mark had gone away. Su Qing looked in the direction the merman had disappeared into, and quietly started moving through the darkness. The wind picked up, slicing through the air like a blade, and echoing through the silence of the night. An hour later, in a remote alley of the city, the air rippled and distorted as the young merman appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. As soon as he appeared, a sensation of danger filled him, and he shot backward. He wasn't fast enough. A thick screen of water appeared behind him, which rapidly spread out to cover the entire alley, blocking all avenues of escape. Then something like a growl echoed from within the water ahead of him. There a whale appeared, the result of a magical technique, bulging out from the water at high speed. It rushed toward the young merman with incomparable force and boundless killing intent, its gaping mouth full of sharp teeth. The young merman's eyes glinted sharply. Well, isn't this funny? Here I am in a foul mood and you show up to amuse me. His hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, but before he could finish, Su Qing's shadow, which was melded with the darkness, seemed to stretch like ropes, wrapping around his arms and pulling his hands apart, making it impossible to finish the gesture. Then the shadow stretched toward his throat. Wherever the shadow touched him, he felt an intense pain, like something corroding his flesh. The young merman's expression flickered. Along with the pain came an intense sensation of deadly crisis, and his breath came in ragged pants as the whale got closer and closer. Just when it seemed the whale would consume him, he howled loudly, and a blue light erupted from within him. The blinding light scattered the gruish shadow and spread out to fill the area. It stabbed into the whale, causing the projection to collapse. However, the power behind the whale didn't vanish and continued to surge like a wave. The young merman trembled and staggered backward, coughing up blood, his expression ferocious. Yet he managed to take advantage of the time bought by the blue light to reach toward his bag of holding. Before he could open it, the shadow once again grabbed his arms, preventing him from moving. Then the shadow started spreading out over him. This development caused the young merman's heart to fill with astonishment. At the same time, a dark glow shot out from the darkness and toward his forehead. Behind that dark glow was a figure in gray emerging from the screen of water. The dark glow moved with the speed of a black bolt of lightning, and the young man behind it had black hair swirling around him, his face expressionless, but his eyes as cold as ice. The wind around him was like a scythe, as if the ambassador of death had come with him, grinning within its black cloak. "It's you," the young merman blurted as the sensation of deadly crisis within him grew stronger. Then he spat out something silver-colored. It shot into the wind, transforming into a massive chakram that rolled toward the incoming iron skewer. When the two weapons clashed, a huge boom echoed out. The massive power behind both attacks caused both the chakram and the skewer to fly off to the side. However, that didn't stop Su Qing and the young merman from locking eyes. As Su Qing closed in, the spiked gills on the side of the young merman's face flared, making him look even more vicious than before. At the same time, he spat out a blue pearl. "Time to die," he howled. The blue pearl erupted with shocking rays of light which shot towards Su Qing from all directions. This was a life essence divine ability, and the young merman was fully confident that not even someone in the great circle of qi condensation could stand up to it. Only a foundation establishment cultivator would have a chance. Grinning viciously, he prepared to deal with the gruish shadow that still covered him. However, that was when the blue light unleashed a huge boom, and the young merman's expression flickered with surprise. Within the bounds created by that blue light, a massive figure could now be seen, seemingly propping up heaven and earth as it stood there. It was pitch black, with two horns on its head and spikes covering its body like an evil ghost. In fact, it seemed almost like the king of all evil ghosts. Roaring noiselessly, it extended both of its hands and grabbed the blue light. It was the spectral hobgoblin. Beneath that immense spectral hobgoblin was Su Qing, his face completely expressionless as he closed in on the young merman. Su Qing was covered in wounds from that binding light, but his flesh was already healing. What was more, the killing intent in his eyes had reached an explosive level. Neither in his previous clash with the young merman, nor on the occasion when he fought the non-human innkeeper, had Su Qing gone all out like this. He hadn't used his shadow, he hadn't summoned the spectral hobgoblin, and he hadn't revealed his powers of regeneration. He would only reveal his true abilities when dealing with someone he was about to kill. Projection of energy and blood, and your cultivation base. This is impossible. Your powers of regeneration, The young merman's face was a mask of utter astonishment, and as the sensation of deadly crisis turned into one of complete terror, he lost his ability to speak straight. He wanted to open his bag of holding and take out a communication Jade slip to send a message asking for help, but the shadow wrapping him up almost seemed alive. No matter how he wrenched his hands about, he couldn't free himself and couldn't take out anything from his bag of holding. As for Su Qing, he didn't waste any time at all. As he closed in, a dagger glinted in his right hand. When the young merman saw the dagger, he let loose a mad howl. Ignoring the shadow wrapping around his neck, as well as how various parts of him were melting, he suddenly twitched. In that instant, his legs flipped up and blurred, transforming into a black fishtail, which he thrust toward Su Qing with all the force he could muster. At the same time, his natural bloodline ability erupted, causing the illusory merman projection around him to join with him in the powerful tail strike. Su Qing's facial expression remained unchanged, nor did he slow down. Instead, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched. As he did, the spectral hobgoblin did the same. Flesh was shredded and blood sprayed everywhere as the young merman's fishtail collapsed into several pieces, and as the spectral hobgoblin's blow landed on the huge merman projection, it shattered. The ground shook, and a miserable shriek rang out from the young merman's mouth. However, the surrounding water screen was so thick that the sound remained captured in the alley. "I curse you," the young merman screamed, his eyes crimson. As he did, the shattered and bloody remnants of his fish tail twitched as if alive, then burst into flames which shot toward Su Qing at incredible speed. It happened fast, but not faster than Su Qing could react. As the flaming flesh and blood surrounded him, he moved with even greater speed, leaving behind nothing but a series of afterimages to be surrounded by the curse attack. Then he appeared behind the young merman, and before the shattered fishtail could do anything further, he put his dagger to the young merman's throat. Trembling and his voice shrill, the young merman shrieked, "Su Qing, I." He never finished speaking, only those 3 words left his mouth before. Su Qing slashed the cold dagger through his throat. As usual, he wasn't interested in hearing anyone's dying words. A familiar slashing sound echoed about. As blood sprayed, the young merman twitched violently, like a fish on the chopping block whose neck had just been slit. His eyes went wide, and he tried to look over his shoulder, but he failed. He took a last gurgling gasp, then collapsed to the ground in front of Su Qing. "You got my clothes dirty," Su Qing said softly. That was the only thing he said during the entire fight. Blood poured out of the young merman's neck and he twitched again. Then he lost his ability to breathe. His eyes still contained a desire to live, and they also seemed incredulous at what was happening. He still couldn't believe that someone like himself, chosen by heaven, would die like this. Then he was thoroughly dead. Su Qing's expression remained calm as he took the speed-enhancing talisman treasure off his leg. Then he scooped up the young merman's bag of holding, which had not been opened the entire fight. Finally, as he turned to leave the alley, his shadow left the young merman's corpse and returned to his feet. At the mouth of the alley, he didn't stop walking and didn't bother to look back at the carnage. He just snapped his fingers. The screen of water which had sealed off the alley trembled and then started to move. It grew smaller, converging on the corpse of the young merman. Finally, it made a thump as all of the power of the water screen was focused on the corpse. A boom rang out as the corpse shattered into a mass of gore. The young merman had been killed in body and soul. Su Qing walked off into the distance. The screen of water became droplets that cleansed the quiet alley. The blood was washed away, creating puddles that the rising sun shone off of brightly. When night ended and day came, it happened in the blink of an eye. It was similar with humans. It was similar to life and death. The early morning breeze drifted through the port, causing the boats to sway in the water. A few wisps of wind, not content to just make the boats sway, tried to kick up some waves. However, the waters of the sea were too deep, and if the wind wasn't careful, it would end up consumed by the waves. In that respect, it would be like a fish that overestimated its strength and provoked something it shouldn't have. The light of dawn was quieter than the wind, and seemed content to simply illuminate the boats on the water. Eventually, it shone on Su Qing, who was still on his way back. To him, there was no difference between killing people and killing fish. As long as someone looked at him with killing intent, the end result was determined. He wanted to stay alive, and therefore, anyone who threatened his life had crossed the line. Some people had it better in life than others. One of the scholar teachers back in the slums had once joked about that. He said that in a rich and flourishing world, those in power would fix such problems with a simple bandage. However, in a chaotic world, there was no way to cover up the truth. In Su Qing's journey of life, he had come to understand that there was one thing in life that was fair, and that was, death wiped away everything. It didn't matter if someone died alone in an alley or if they died surrounded by treasure and fine wine. Both were dead. Second Highness was right. He did smell like rotten fish. Once in his Dharma boat, he washed himself until the noxious odor was gone. Only then did he relax. He was off duty today, so there was no need to go in for roll call. And feeling like there was one less thorn in his side, he was ready to get some good sleep. But first he settled into a cross-legged position and took out a bamboo slip, upon which was carved, Young Merman. He scratched the name out. He looked at the first name on the list, Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior, and his eyes glittered with killing intent. Soon, he murmured. Then he took a look at the bag of holding that the young merman had failed to open. He was curious to see what was inside. After examining it briefly, he sensed some spirit power inside. To his surprise, it wasn't as difficult to open as he'd suspected. After someone died, the branding mark on the bag of holding would vanish. After sending his spirit power inside the bag, he saw a few items. He subconsciously gasped softly. He was this rich. There were only 100 spirit stones. However, there were also 20 spirit notes from the sixth peak, each of which was worth 100 spirit stones. That level of wealth got Su Qing's heart pounding. After all, he'd never had this much money on hand. Of course, he knew that he would need to wait for some time to pass before he tried to exchange the notes. There were some other things in the bag of holding. There were 4 or 5 prized treasures, as well as 2 talisman treasures. One of the talismans was yellow, the other was blue. Seeing them caused Su Qing no small amount of shock. The markings on the talismans were about 80 to 90% complete, indicating they hadn't been used much. After some examination, he concluded that the blue talisman was defensive, while the yellow one could be used offensively. If that fish had managed to get into his bag of holding, Su Qing's eyes narrowed as he contemplated how the fight might have turned out. He probably would have been able to kill his opponent in the end, but it would have taken a lot longer and would have been much more draining. My shadow is proving more and more useful. He glanced down at his shadow and thought back to how it had wrapped around the young merman. It had almost seemed like his shadow was alive. Was I seeing things? Looking at his shadow, he rubbed his chest where the violet crystal was. Eyes glittering, he thought again about how the crystal seemed to help him exercise restraint and control over his shadow. Whether or not his shadow was alive, he had the feeling he should do some more tests. With that, he sent some of his spirit power into the violet crystal, though it took several tries to do successfully. Once he did succeed, his entire body shone with violet light, which became a force of suppression that weighed down on the shadow. The shadow twisted and distorted while simultaneously growing a bit fainter. Su Qing looked closely at the shadow and felt satisfied. He didn't want to waste mental energy trying to figure out if his shadow was somehow alive. The worst-case scenario would be that the shadow had no way to become alive, and he would waste some spirit power figuring out how to suppress it. After a few more attempts, he went through the process of suppressing the shadow, then moved on to other things. Putting the two talisman treasures away, he looked at the remaining items in the bag of holding. There were two things of note. One was a sea chart covered with meticulous notations. It was much more detailed than the sea charts kept by disciples from the seventh peak. It even noted the location of the Merfolk Isles. After examining it, Su Qing came to the conclusion that it was far more valuable than either of the talisman treasures. After all, to disciples who needed the sea to further their cultivation, a detailed sea chart would make sea travel much safer and would make it a lot easier to collect resources. Information was often far more precious than spirit stones. The last item was also far more valuable than the talisman treasures, and that was because he had seen an item like this before, albeit only once. It was a palm-sized piece of iron that resembled a box, yet wasn't a box. After looking at its metal surface, Su Qing took out a similar piece of metal from his bag of holding. He had acquired this from Horsefur in the scavenger base camp. The man's partner Fatmonton had coveted that piece of iron so much that he intentionally let Su Qing attack him. Putting the two pieces of iron next to each other, Su Qing studied them, which was when he realized that they looked exactly the same. What's going on here? Su Qing felt more curious than ever. He had been in many of the shops in the port district, but had never seen anything like these pieces of iron for sale. Yet whether it was Fatmonton's greed to acquire it, or the fact that it was hidden in the young merman's bag of holding, there was obviously something very unusual about this type of metal. I need to figure out a way to get some more information. After some thought, Su Qing put everything away, looked out at the sky, then lay down on his wooden cot and closed his eyes. He didn't rest for long. About 4 hours later, when it was afternoon, he opened his eyes and stretched. He actually felt great. Best of all, he felt a lot more relaxed after the previous night's events, and he also sensed that his sea and mountain incantation was very close to the breakthrough point. The 7th level was the Great Circle for me, so what will happen when I reach the 8th level? I wonder if I'll have enough battle prowess to kill Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. Actually, he felt like he had spent too much time in the 7th level. But during that time, the sea and mountain incantation had been preparing for some sort of transformation, and now he could sense the time had come. Sitting down cross-legged, he activated the spirit convergence formation, fed it a spirit stone, then closed his eyes and started cultivating. Time passed. Afternoon faded into evening and then night fell. As Su Qing sat there cross-legged, he suddenly shivered and his flesh and blood became taut. His bones started to creak and his blood vessels bulged, becoming like vicious snakes spreading across his skin. It was a shocking sight, but at the same time, the power of his energy and blood surged with every beat of his heart. As the power of energy and blood swirled around him, the spectral hobgoblin appeared, roaring noiselessly to the sky. As it did, its expression twisted and distorted as if some immense force was forcing it to transform. When an ordinary person cultivated the sea and mountain incantation to the Great Circle, the result was an adult spectral hobgoblin. But with Su Qing, the spectral hobgoblin appeared in the 7th level. He had no idea what would happen after that. The truth was that not even the person who invented the sea and mountain incantation could ever have guessed that someone like Su Qing would come along and reach the Great Circle early. After all, the sea and mountain incantation was a low-level technique that was usually cultivated while simultaneously having to deal with mutagen. Never before had someone done what Su Qing had done, in other words, cultivate it while completely free of mutagen. As time passed, the veins on Su Qing bulged out even more, until it looked like his skin was covered with countless cracks. Blood started oozing out all over him, and his energy and blood seemed like they might make him explode. It was like Su Qing's body was a clay pot, and his energy and blood were trying to explode out from inside. However, that was when a violet light spilled out from his chest, covering him, repairing all the damage. His physical form became more refined, while at the same time intense pain filled him. His bones cracked. His flesh and blood shattered. It was like he couldn't keep control of his physical body. However, the light of the violet crystal repaired everything. It became a cycle, over and over again. His energy and blood grew stronger, to the point where the Dharma boat spell formation couldn't contain the fluctuations. From a distance, it looked like his boat was bathed in a blood-colored glow. As the power flowed out, it attracted the attention of other disciples in Harbor 79. As they looked over in astonishment, Su Qing opened his eyes and they were crimson. A massive rumbling sound echoed out, filled with the resonance of a single character. It filled his mind with heaven-rending, earth-crushing booms and caused him to shake from head to toe. Meanwhile, the spectral hobgoblin's noiseless howl grew more intense as it began to split apart in reveal a new body. It was completely green and seemed to burst with berserk madness. There was also something very ghoulish about it. Its cracked and wizened skin resembled the ground during a deep drought. Its hair was long and messy as it hung over its shoulders, and its eyes were crimson. It had vicious fangs, as well as a long black horn that crackled with lightning. As it howled noiselessly to the sky, it seemed ready to rip apart the dome of heaven. What was more, it seemed to be surrounded, not with water vapor but with black flames that scorched everything around it. Strictly speaking, they weren't flames, but rather a natural result of all the water vapor in the area being sucked up. Drought demon, Su Qing murmured. That was the specific character that had filled his mind. It was also the next iteration of the energy and blood projection of the sea and mountain incantation. It was even stronger than the hobgoblin. Goblins can move mountains, hobgoblins can transport seas, and drought demons can scorch all living things. The moment Su Qing opened his mouth to mutter, "Drought demon," a power more vigorous than anything before erupted from within him. Su Qing shot to his feet, bursting with fleshly body power that broke through all previous shackles. He was now in a higher level of chi condensation. His Dharma boat defenses couldn't withstand the force and shattered, and even the boat itself sustained some damage. Meanwhile, the disciples in Harbor 79 looked on with wide eyes and hearts filled with shock. Not even Su Qing could have guessed that his sea and mountain incantation breakthrough would cause such a commotion. Furthermore, he could tell, because of the explosive results from the sea and mountain incantation, his sea-forming scripture was now stirring on the verge of a breakthrough. As Su Qing stood there silently, the surrounding disciples clasped hands and called out respectfully to him. "Congratulations, elder brother Su Qing. Congratulations, elder brother." They showed respect to strength. That was also why they called him elder brother. They could easily imagine the incredible strength required to cause a commotion this way during cultivation, and also shatter the defenses of a Class 6 Dharma boat. What was more, the pressure emanating off of Su Qing caused all of them to tremble violently. This was the pressure of a truly powerful expert. Moonlight shone onto the surface of the water and the damaged Dharma boat. Su Qing stood there, somewhat in a daze as he listened to the surrounding disciples offer their congratulations. Although he had gone into this sea and mountain incantation breakthrough intentionally, the process had been dangerous, and his heart was still pounding as a result. He thought back to how his body had collapsed over and over again. Reliving the feeling, he couldn't help but inhale deeply. If he hadn't been able to rely on the violet crystal to recover, then the spectral drought demon would never have appeared, and he would be dead. Of course, the boost that came from surviving that ordeal was quite spectacular. That was especially true of the now-vanishing spectral drought demon, whose terrifying strength had Su Qing full of anticipation. After a moment, he walked out onto the main deck, where the moonlight illuminated his black hair and gray robe. He stood tall and straight, his facial features cold but delicately attractive. He had the unusual air of a breakthrough still on him. Looking around calmly at all the nearby disciples, he clasped hands and bowed. "Many thanks, fellow disciples." The disciples returned the bow. They could detect the cultivation fluctuations that continued to roll off Su Qing, and from that, they could deduce that his nighttime session of cultivation wasn't going to end with this breakthrough. Feeling even more shocked than before, they went back into their Dharma boats, not wanting to disturb him any further. It would have been completely inconceivable for something to happen like this a few months ago, when Su Qing first arrived at Seven Blood Eyes. But now it was a reality. Su Qing retracted his gaze and stepped back into the cabin. Sitting down cross-legged, he looked at the spirit convergence formation and the spirit stone there, which was full of cracks and almost fully drained. He also looked around at the damage to his boat. He frowned. He knew that his boat's defenses had been destroyed by the sudden shockwave. The spirit stone had similarly suffered. I wonder if the next sea and mountain incantation breakthrough will be like this one. He still felt a bit nervous, but more than that, disappointed. After all, it was going to be expensive to fix his Dharma boat. However, after thinking about what he'd acquired after killing the young merman, he felt a bit better. That said, now wasn't the time to be calculating money matters. Stowing his anxiety regarding the sea and mountain incantation breakthrough, he focused on his sea-forming scripture, which was currently roiling on the verge of its own breakthrough. Taking a deep breath, he replaced the depleted spirit stone in the formation, then reactivated the boat's defenses. Then he looked at the moonlight streaming down to hit the boat itself, and after mulling the matter over, he added a second spirit stone. Then he performed an incantation gesture, and the Dharma boat rumbled as the power of the two stones added further strength to the defenses. A moment later, even the moonlight was completely blocked out. Having accomplished that, he closed his eyes and sensed the power flowing through him, which was many times greater than. Previously, he had already been as strong as the great circle of the sea and mountain incantation. Now that he had burst through the previous shackles, his fleshly body power had reached an even higher level. It was so intense that Su Qing knew he wouldn't even need to utilize the sea-forming scripture to strike fear into the heart of Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. He could do that with a single punch from the sea and mountain incantation. It made sense considering that he was the first person, whether in ancient times or modern, to cultivate the sea and mountain incantation to this level. In the past, the hobgoblin was the limit, but now the spectral hobgoblin had experienced an unheard-of transformation into a drought demon. Su Qing could still sense that arid dryness and mad desire to scorch all living things. What was more, the spectral drought demon could be considered a newborn while in the 8th level. Su Qing could hardly imagine what it would be like in the 9th level, and when he reached the 10th level, which was the true Great Circle, he had to wonder, would the drought demon transform again? At this point, there was no one who could give him guidance regarding the sea and mountain incantation. Not even its creator had accomplished what Su Qing had. After pondering the situation for a bit, he started working with the sea-forming scripture. Time slipped by slowly but surely. 2 hours later, a wind kicked up in Harbor 79. As it passed over the water, it converged on Su Qing's Dharma boat, where it created a vortex, like a black hole that caused all the spirit power in the area to rumble toward it. As the wind blew, the boats in the harbor swayed up and down. All of the 7th peak disciples there looked back to the spot they had been focused on before, as if they all wanted to witness Su Qing's rise to prominence. Majestic streams of spirit power struggled to outdo each other as they rushed toward Su Qing's boat, where they poured into him and converged in his spirit sea. Every time the sea-forming scripture powered up, that sea grew by 30 meters. Although that growth included both its surface area and depth, looking at it from above, it was like watching a small circle grow into a larger circle. As Su Qing neared the breakthrough point, the aura of the forbidden sea entered him with the spirit power, causing rumbling and cracking sounds to fill him. At the same time, his spirit sea expanded. As it broke past the previous limit, it reached an extent of 240 meters. However, things weren't over yet. As the spirit power continued to course madly through him, the sea expanded further. 249, 252. It continued all the way to 261. Only then did the spirit sea seem full. Su Qing opened his eyes, and violet light glittered brightly. At the same time, something about him seemed beyond that which was mortal. "Dragon whale," he murmured, waving his right hand. Something like the howl of a dragon erupted from within him, while at the same time a head burrowed out from his chest that resembled both a dragon and a whale. It was pitch black and emanated a shocking and ghastly aura. It howled as it emerged from Su Qing, growing larger and larger, smashing through the Dharma boat defenses to rise overhead. It was fully 240 meters in length and had numerous swaying tentacles that emanated a blue fluorescence. As it appeared, the rumbling sounds caused waves to roll across the surface of the water. If this dragon whale crashed down, it would surely unleash force that would cause mountains to shake. The disciples in the surrounding Dharma boats were shocked. Forbidden sea dragon whale. That's the characteristic magic from the 8th level of the sea-forming scripture. But not everybody can form a dragon whale in the 8th level. You have to have an exceptional level of mastery to pull it off. Su Qing unleashed a shocking display of fleshly body power earlier, now that his magical techniques have reached the 8th level. This battle prowess. Meanwhile, Su Qing sat cross-legged in his Dharma boat, looking up at the dragon whale undulating above. His eyes shone brightly. He had been looking forward to this day. The sea-forming scripture description mentioned that when reaching the 8th level and forming a spirit sea of 240 meters, it was possible to form a forbidden sea dragon whale. It was the result of a magical technique and would exist permanently within him. The whale would swim in the sea, accompanying a 7th peak disciple and their Dharma boats as they traveled about. In other words, they could provide major assistance to the disciples when they went out to the open sea. However, forming the dragon whale required a high level of control, so not all disciples could succeed when reaching the 8th level. I finally reached this level. Then he exercised a thought, and the dragon whale roared as it shot down into the water in a huge splash. Afterward, it was nowhere to be seen. However, when Su Qing sent his thoughts out, the dragon whale would form again in the water. The forbidden sea dragon whale was a watershed point for seventh peak disciples. If I ran into Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior out on the open sea, I'd probably be able to cut him down. Su Qing's eyes glittered. If I wasn't on the open sea, though, I would have to pay a huge price just to seriously injure him. I need to go out to sea. I need to improve my cultivation base, get more resources, then return, and figure out a way to slaughter Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. At daybreak I'm going to go upgrade my Dharma boat, and hopefully I'll be able to go out to sea tomorrow. Worst case scenario, I'll aim for the day after. Su Qing could also tell that, along with his double breakthrough in both fleshly body and cultivation base, he had a more subtle level of control over his shadow. That made him even more confident than before. Meanwhile, all of the disciples in the harbor around him had heard the roar of the dragon whale. It was a unique sound that most people wouldn't recognize, but disciples of the seventh peak knew exactly what it was. \\\\. In the Coast Guard Division in Harbor 32, a huge battleship was leaving the port. Coast Guard battleships were unique and very different from the disciples' Dharma boats. A young man in a gray robe stood on the deck of the battleship, pulsing with powerful fluctuations. He had blue hair and golden eyes, and as he gazed off into the distance, he murmured, "So, another person reached the 8th level, and they formed a dragon whale. Whoever this is, they're not an ordinary person. Very interesting. Do you want me to make some inquiries to find out more information?" asked one of the 7 or 8 Coast Guard Division disciples behind him. Unexpectedly, one of those disciples was Zhou Qingpeng, who stood there looking cautious and somewhat timid. As he had mentioned during the reunion dinner, he had received a recommendation to work with a chosen disciple in the Coast Guard Division. It was the young man with blue hair, who was generally known as the #1 Qi condensation disciple in the 7th peak. Even some conclave disciples would call him fellow Taoist. He was Ding Xiaohai. "Wait until we get back," Ding Xiaohai said coolly. Then he looked away. \\\\. Around the same time, the captain reclined comfortably in his chair in the Violent Crimes Division, munching on a rather rare star-shaped fruit. He also noticed what was happening, and it caused him to look in the direction of Harbor 79. He smiled. So he was in such a good mood he broke through. What a straightforward kid. I like him, but he's still a bit too weak. I really can't have someone so weak in my unit. Maybe I should find a few people for him to kill. The captain put down the fruit and started to think deeply about the issue. He really was a freak, just like Zhang San said. \\\. That night quite a few people from the 7th peak noticed Su Qing's dragon whale. It led to a variety of reactions. Some people felt anticipation, others admiration, and others envy. There were also some people in the port district who felt fury and grief, and those were the merfolk cultivators. Several people had gathered in the shadowy alley where the young merman had died. In front of the group were 2 figures, one short and one tall. They were sisters, and they were the older cousins of the young merman, as well as the lovers of Third Highness. The oldest sister seemed calm, but the younger one stood there trembling, her gills flared and her eyes burning with killing intent. Off to the side was an old merman who seemed to wallow in pain and bitterness as he said, "This is where His Highness's aura vanished. However, this area has clearly been cleaned up. There aren't any clues to determine what happened. Given His Highness's strength and status, I'd say he probably isn't dead, just missing. Although, surely his life slip." "His Highness's life slip shattered," said the younger of the 2 sisters through gritted teeth. The old merman's face went pale. As a Dharma protector, he knew that he should face consequences for a mistake like this. However, he had only been following orders. He had been strictly prohibited from following His Highness earlier that night. Of course, he had an idea about the young merman's secret hobby. That said, he could never have guessed that something like this would happen. Could it be the work of 7 Blood Eyes leadership? The old merman asked hesitantly. If 7 Blood Eyes leadership wanted to kill someone, would they need to cover it up? The older of the 2 young mermaids said, her voice cold. Furthermore, His Highness's bag of holding had a wish box in it. That item is very important, and we can't let it fall into the hands of a random person. "Sister," the younger mermaid said angrily, "His Highness perished. We need to be thinking about revenge. Why are you so focused on the wish box? You know full well how important a wish box is. It's a gift that represents an entire epoch. All I know is that His Highness perished, and we need to track down the killer." The 2 sisters glared at each other for a long moment. Then the older sister said, "You want revenge, I want the wish box. We can do both." As a member of the Imperial clan, His Highness's blood can be tracked. If the killer is nearby, we should be able to sense it. First, we need to identify all the people His Highness had conflicts with recently. That includes the family members of anyone he tortured and killed. We need to investigate all of them. I want to know who had the guts to kill the crown prince of our people. Off to the side, the younger sister ground her teeth, her eyes shining with madness. After we find him, I'm going to torment him. I'll make him and his family beg for death. They'll howl in pain and grief. Then I'll force their souls into the bodies of shrimps and eat them. To most people in Seven Blood Eyes, that night was no different than usual. But to others, it was a very different night. Among those others, the reactions included sighing on a Dharma boat, envious of extraordinary people. Stewing in fury and rage, vowing to chop enemies into mincemeat. Leaning back casually in a chair, a mountain of fruit seeds piling up off to the side. Sitting bitterly in an inn, feeling incomparably flustered and anxious. In some cases, the way to decide if a person was acclimating to a new situation wasn't to look at their demeanor or bearing. Instead, you looked at how people reacted to them. Those who were envious were the disciples in Harbor 79. Those who were furious were the merfolk cultivators. The one with the pile of fruit seeds was the captain, and the one who was flustered and anxious was Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. Regardless, as the light of dawn spread out over the lands, it obscured the various reactions. It was like the poem that spoke of the dragonfish dancing through the night. The next day, that energetic, sleepless night resulted in exhaustion. As shafts of sunlight poked through the damaged exterior of the Dharma boat and landed on Su Qing, he opened his eyes. The sunlight revealed the sparkle in his eyes which, like the rising sun, held endless optimism for the future. I wonder if sunrise on the open ocean will feel like this. Thinking about such things, he got to his feet. He had a lot to do today. First, he went to the Violent Crimes Division to request time off to go out to sea. It wasn't a complicated process. Seventh Peak disciples didn't always stay at port. Since their cultivation was linked to the sea, it was only natural for them to leave. After going through the various procedures, he was granted 40 days of leave. If he came back early, he was required to report in. If he came back later, he would have to work overtime to make up the difference. After finishing at the Violent Crimes Division, it was still early, so he decided to head to the Sixth Peak shops. After all, it seemed unlikely that what happened last time would reoccur. However, after arriving, he looked around at the shops and hesitated. As he did, he realized he'd just received a voice message on his identity medallion. It was from the captain. Su Qing, did you forget about? Su Qing stared at his identity medallion in shock, trying to figure out what the captain was talking about. Never mind, I'll just be frank. You owe me 500 spirit stones, Su Qing. When are you gonna pay me back? Glaring, Su Qing responded with a single sentence. It's 100 spirit stones. All right, fine, I'm not gonna haggle. 300 spirit stones, okay. Now, when are you gonna pay me back? Su Qing didn't respond. Instead, he took out the bamboo slip with the names of his enemies carved onto it. Finding the captain's name, he scratched out the question mark after the name. Hey, why aren't you saying anything? I saw that you requested time off, you brat. Are you going out to sea to avoid paying me back? Ah, whatever. The open sea is dangerous, and you really have to make sure your Dharma boat is upgraded. I want to make sure you don't end up dead and my 500 spirit stones completely lost. Therefore, I have to remind you that if you want work done on your Dharma boat, you should go see Xianxia. Xianxia, thought Su Qing. He hesitated. The captain, meanwhile, seemed very excited to talk about Xianxia. In fact, he went on to give more details, explaining how Su Qing should act around Xianxia, what he should say, and other things. Finally, he ended his message. Su Qing stood there for a while thinking. Then, feeling a bit surprised at himself, he went to the transportation division. Upon arriving, he found Xianxia squatting atop a pile of cargo, smoking a pipe and looking very relaxed. Occasionally, he would shout some orders to the workers under his command. When he caught sight of Su Qing, his eyes narrowed slightly, and then they glittered. Yo, shouldn't you be at work now, junior brother Su? What are you doing here? As Su Qing neared, he noted how Xianxia was squatting on the pile of merchandise. Without hesitation, he hopped onto the pile. This time, before Su Qing could worry about maintaining some distance, Xianxia shifted to the side to make sure there was some space between the two of them. Su Qing looked at him for a moment, then squatted down. Smiling, Xianxia noted Su Qing's handsome features that would drive the opposite sex crazy. After muttering to himself for a moment, he said, "Squatting is pretty comfortable, huh?" Agreed, Su Qing said with a nod. So what's up? Elder brother Zhang, my Dharma boat needs some upgrades. Zhang San was stunned. You need to upgrade your Dharma boat. Who told you to talk to me about that? The captain. Su Qing didn't answer the question. He just took out 2 apples, one of which he gave to Zhang San. Zhang San accepted it out of instinct, then suddenly seemed regretful. He offered it back to Su Qing. Su Qing didn't take it. Zhang San smiled wryly, muttered a few more times as he rubbed the apple, and then looked at Su Qing. Su Qing looked back at him. A moment passed and Zhang San laughed. If you promise me one thing, I'll help you with the upgrades. Su Qing had been paying attention to Zhang San's wording and noticed that he didn't mention helping Su Qing find someone else to help with the upgrades. He was going to do the work himself. Say the word, elder brother Zhang. From now on, do you mind not staring at my throat? It's hot today, but it's giving me the chills. Zhang San blinked a few times as he looked at Su Qing. Su Qing thought about it for a moment, then looked Zhang San in the eyes. Zhang San facepalmed and sighed. Your gaze is really strange. It's like whatever you look at you want to hurt. All right, forget it. It's not going to be easy for you to change how your eyes work. I'll help you with your Dharma boat, but I have to tell you up front that I charge a lot. With that, he hopped off the pile of cargo and beckoned to Su Qing. Su Qing stood, clasped hands, and then followed. Zhang San led him to a warehouse behind the transportation division. When he opened the warehouse door, Su Qing saw a whole host of crafting materials glittering brightly. Su Qing was taken aback. The materials were all very high quality, and he even saw 7 or 8 entire Dharma boats that were in various states of disassembly. Toward the back of the warehouse, there was a half-built Coast Guard Division battleship. There were also watercraft from various non-human groups. Su Qing couldn't help but gasp at the sight. He felt like he was actually in one of the 6th Peak shops. Off to the side, Zhang San looked very pleased with himself. What do you think? He said, clasping his hands behind his back. Let me tell you, when it comes to 7th Peak disciples, I might not be the best fighter and I might not have the best cultivation base, but when it comes to working on Dharma boats, HMM and PHH, most 6th Peak disciples can't measure up to me. I have a few dozen warehouses in this area, all filled with my work. Furthermore, no one would dare try to rob me. Thinking back to the instructions the captain had given him, Su Qing opened his eyes wide and tried to look shocked. Then he asked, Elder brother Zhang, are you really a 7th Peak disciple? Zhang San seemed very pleased with Su Qing's facial expression. He burst out laughing. That's exactly what the captain asked me. Sadly, my innate talents were discovered too late, otherwise I'd already be a conclave disciple in the 6th Peak. Now, bring out your Dharma boat so I can have a look. Su Qing's eyes shone with respect as he took out the little bottle with his Dharma boat in it. Zhang San looked it over, and then without a word turned to start working. But then Su Qing, after hesitating for a moment, thought back to what the captain had told him and said, Elder brother Zhang San, I feel like my Dharma boat is actually built fairly well. It has many parts that I've upgraded to a very high standard. Zhang San stopped in place, his eyebrows raised to form an inverted Chinese letter shape. Fairly well, very high standard. Are you serious? Forget the materials, the craftsmanship alone is just atrocious. And look at the sides of the boat. Just glancing at the hull on either side you can tell the spirit convergence formation is put in shoddily. That scale was installed wrong, which messes up the boat's structure and influences the formation. I can tell with a glance that this work was done by some piece of trash disciple from the 6th Peak. Oh, and look at the prow and stern. This is supposed to be a Class 6 Dharma boat, not a Class 1. The emphasis should be on the inner workings, not the appearance. Why make it so eye-catching? It'll just attract the attention of enemies. Practicality is the most important thing. Peering into the bottle, Zhang San said, Trash. This thing is complete and utter trash. You can't take this thing out on the open sea. If you do and you run into a big storm or a large sea monster, then it simply doesn't have the strength, rigidity, stability, or reliability to keep it watertight. Su Qing felt shaken at how professional Zhang San sounded. Feeling even more respect than before, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. Seeing this, Zhang San felt pleased. He enjoyed it when other disciples showed him reverence and admired his professionalism. That was how the captain had treated him as well, although in retrospect the end result was him losing a lot of spirit stones. Regardless, he had originally intended to just do some minor upgrades, but after Su Qing mentioned that his boat was built fairly well, it was too much for Zhang San to take. Zhang San bore Su Qing no ill will. Everything he said was accurate. If an ordinary disciple took Su Qing's Dharma boat out to sea, it wouldn't be problematic. But Su Qing's battle prowess virtually guaranteed that he would run into some powerful sea beasts and go to some dangerous areas. Therefore, a Dharma boat like this wasn't suitable. Looking very pleased with himself, Xianxia proudly said, "I can see that you've been focusing on durability, so I'll help you focus on that. We'll make sure that when you take this Dharma boat to sea, if you get attacked by any huge beasts, you'll be fine as long as they aren't in the Foundation establishment level. And even if you take damage, the boat won't collapse." "Many thanks, elder brother," Su Qing said somberly, and then took out some spirit stones. "I have 200 spirit stones here. I have some more that I set aside to use when I go out to sea. Is this enough?" He had the feeling that 200 spirit stones probably wouldn't cover all the work. Zhang San looked at the spirit stones, and then at Su Qing. Then he thought back to what the captain had said about Su Qing, and what he'd witnessed that day in the Sixth Peak shop. He recalled the cry of the dragon whale the previous night, and the spirit power fluctuations. And considering how happily he'd criticized Su Qing's Dharma boat, he swallowed any bitterness he felt and put on a smile. "That's enough. You have some great future prospects, kid. I invested in the captain back in the day, and as for you, I'll consider it another investment. Come pick up the boat tonight." With that, Zhang San got to work. Su Qing looked deeply at Zhang San, gave a solemn expression of thanks, clasped hands and bowed deeply, then left. After he was gone, Zhang San let loose a long sigh and scowled. "I screwed up again. Every time I run into these people who are so good at cultivation, I always have to show off my skills. I could just sit around enjoying my work. But now, I have to live up to my own bragging. Wait, hold on. How come the little punk was acting like the captain? That said, the captain is really stingy. He didn't give me a single spirit stone, pretended he was broke. The kid is actually a lot nicer than the captain." In the final analysis, he was doing this for two reasons. The first was that the captain had recommended keeping an eye on Su Qing. The second reason was that he trusted the captain's sense of judgment. "I'm not going to regret making this investment." Zhang San had started out obscure and unknown. Now he was still obscure and unknown, although he kept it that way on purpose. He was very wealthy, ran the entire transportation division from behind the scenes, and was someone nobody would ever dare to rob. And all of that was because he had once helped the captain upgrade his Dharma boat. \\\\. After leaving the transportation division, a strange expression appeared in Su Qing's eyes. Finally, he took out his identity medallion and sent a voice message to the captain. "Captain, do you think it worked? Did you do everything I told you to do?" "Yeah." "Ha, perfect, it's fine. Zhang San is one of us, plus he's rich. But if you think you're taking advantage of him now, just make sure to help him out later." Su Qing nodded earnestly. Then he took his bamboo slip back out. On one side, he added Zhang San's name. Then he flipped it to the side with his enemies on it and added a question mark back to the captain's name. \\\. Back in the Violent Crimes Division, the captain was happily eating some strange fruits that couldn't be purchased in the capital city and could only be found on one of the non-human islands far out at sea. After finishing his message to Su Qing, he picked up a document relating to a complaint filed against Zhang San. On a recent mission out at sea, Zhang San had unleashed an incredible level of bloody violence, including plundering some non-human trading ships. The complaint demanded that Zhang San be severely punished. After reading it, the captain smiled, then waved his hand, causing the report to crumble into ashes. "As long as my off-peak friends don't betray me, nobody will lay a hand on them.